Good evening, and welcome to this meeting of the Boston School Committee. I'm School Committee Chair Jerry Robinson. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I'll ask my colleagues to please unmute and join me. I pledge allegiance
to
to the flag
flag
of the United States
of America
America,
and to the
to the
republic
republic
for which
for
it
which
stands,
it stands,
one nation,
nation
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty
liberty
and
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 justice
justice
for all.
for all.
Because this is a remote meeting, I will ask Ms. Sullivan to please call the roll.
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Alkins,
Present.
Mr. Cadet Hernandez,
Present.
Ms. Lopera, Mr. Meta,
present,
Ms. Polanco Garcia, Mr. Tran,
Present.
Mr. O'Neill,
Present.
Ms. Robinson.
Present.
Thank you. We do have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. Tonight's session is being shared live on Zoom. It will be rebroadcast on Boston City TV and posted on the school committee's webpage and on YouTube. The recording will be available in all of the BPS languages. Tonight's meeting documents are posted on the committee's webpage, bostonpublicschools.org/school committee, under the January 18th meeting link. The meeting documents have been translated into all of the major BPS languages. Any translations that are not ready prior to the start of the meeting will be posted as soon as they are finalized. The committee is pleased to be offering live simultaneous interpretation in Spanish, Haitian Creole, Cabo Verdeano, Cantonese, Mandarin, Vietnamese, and American Sign Language. The interpretation feature has been activated. Click the globe icon at the bottom of your screen to select your language preference. I'd like to remind everyone to speak at a slower pace to assist our interpreters. Thank you to everyone who signed up for public comment. Sign up for public comment closed today at 4:30 p.m. Please make sure you are signed into Zoom under the same name you used to sign up for public comment. You can use the Zoom tools to rename yourself so that committee staff will be able to recognize you when it comes time to call on you. Thank you for your cooperation. We'll begin with the approval of minutes. At this time, I would like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the January 11th, 2023 school committee meeting as presented. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion or objection to the motion? Ms. Sullivan, will you please call the roll?
Dr. Alkins,
Yes.
Mr. Cadet Hernandez,
Yes.
Ms. Lopera, Ms. Polanco Garcia, Mr. Tran,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Robinson.
Yes.
The minutes are approved unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. We will move on to superintendent's report. I present to you our superintendent, Mary Skipper.
Thank you, Chair. So first of all, good evening, everyone. Given the full agenda, I will make my remarks brief tonight. First, I wanted to share that we've had several losses in the BPS community over the past several weeks. Most recently, Heidi Cahoon McEwen, who is an assistant director for the Office of Special Education, and a paraprofessional, Alice Abelis, who was at the Rafael Hernandez Dual Immersion School. Both of those fine educators passed away. Of Heidi, principals and special education colleagues all described Heidi as an incredibly passionate, tireless worker, with 1,000% dedication to making sure that special education students received everything they needed throughout her career. Alice's most recent position was as a para in the 3rd grade at the Hernandez, She also volunteered at the school after her retirement last January, and she was still providing support at the school for whatever the school needed. She was often seen at breakfast, even in the retirement, even in her retirement, she never left the Hernandez or the BPS. Her service with us spanned over 33 years, and her legacy she left was inspired. It's been a difficult few weeks with both of these losses. I want to really shout out our social workers and all of those who are helping. We had employee assistance professionals from the city and interagency support, but really just who stood in the space with us and provided much needed support, really giving our students, our families, our staff the ability to grieve and the space to do that as we mourn the loss of these two extraordinary educators. So please, if you would, just join me in a moment of silence for both Heidi and for Alice. Thank you. I'd also like to acknowledge a matter that some of our dedicated BTU members will be speaking in public comment about tonight. And that is the delayed retro pay for members of the BTU. And this is retro pay that's owed as part of the collective bargaining agreement that was voted on this past fall. We had an opportunity to provide a written update to last week's BTU membership, and also to share the information here to just ensure the update reaches everyone. President Tang has been a strong advocate for her members, particularly of this issue, and we recognize it is an issue. We've received a large data file from the city that lists out pay data for every BTU employee for the term specified in the MOA. And it literally means we have to go through them and reconcile the data to process retro for the eligible populations and in the correct amounts. And this includes both current BTU members and former BTU members. This process is complex, but it is well underway and is being worked on actively. Just given the sheer volume of records, it's taking even longer than anticipated. Upon completion, the retro payments will be issued in full. Unfortunately, the retro pay will be issued after the January 20th paycheck, even though the Office of Human Capital made every effort to make that date, to make that payroll date. We're very optimistic that we can get everything resolved so that the retro can get paid out by the second paycheck in February, which is the 17th of February. We will regularly update our BTU partners with our progress toward the goal, and we'll notify you of any changes to that. We understand that the delay is impactful to the BTU members, to their families. We want our BTU members and partners to know that we share the frustration, and we really are doing everything that we can to ensure that you receive your retro pay as soon as possible, and we sincerely apologize. We're looking actively at how to evolve our human capital systems. This is one of the areas we're drilling down on to figure out for a district our size, how to be able to streamline them, to have enterprise level systems, and to move them forward so that we can be more efficient internally and in conjunction with the city, especially when it involves large batches of employee data and payroll. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and President Tang for her leadership. In terms of COVID, I just want to publicly thank everyone for the support they gave in the temporary masking effort. I appreciate everyone's cooperation and commitment to keeping our school community safe. This year, we've seen staff absences range from a high of approximately 500, which was January 6th, right after the break, to a low of about 200 on January 9th at the end of that week. And for the student absences, we saw a high of 8,700 on January 4th. Again, that was right at return, to a low of 5,200 for January 10th. As the data shows, we saw a 40% decrease in student absences over the course of the first 5 days of the holiday back. And similarly, we saw a 60% decrease in staff absences over the same time. This enabled us to really be able to manage our absences, cover the staff absences, so that we had educators in front of all of our students, and ensure that the volume that our vast majority of students could participate on a daily basis in education. To give you a sense, at this time last year, the average daily attendance on the first Tuesday after MLK Day, Junior Day, was 86%. And this year we saw an average daily rate of 90%. So I think that the temporary masking, along with all of the other mitigation strategies that we put in place, clearly had the impact we were looking for in keeping our community safe and allowing them to be able to return to school and stay in school. So just a thank you to the community. I also wanted to update on the proposed school merges, as I know this was a conversation that began last week at public comment. As you know, we proposed merges, merging the Sumner and the Philbrook into one school, and the Shaw and the Taylor into one school. We believe that combining these school communities will produce stronger outcomes ultimately for our students. And this will really enable us to create continuous K-6, pre-K-6 pathways. And it'll also free up resources to reinvest in school programming, so thus benefiting all students. We're still in conversations with the school communities to really work out details before we bring any formal proposal to you as the school committee. One of my top priorities for the district, when I first began, I articulated it, and I've said it ever since, is getting family and community engagement right. And that's why when I started my tenure as superintendent, I decided to delay the vote on the proposed mergers, which, if you remember right, were intended for last fall, the votes. We know there's ways we can improve family engagement, reaching people where they are, especially in their native languages, and we're actively working on it. It's something we're building our capacity to do, because we understand it's so important. We also understand the frustration that families are feeling, and we're committed to sending out communications to the entire Sumner community, the entire Philbrook, the entire Shaw, and the entire Taylor, to really ensure that the whole community gets the same information at the same time. And we're committing to be able to do that no later than February 1st. We'll update families on the status of the mergers, upcoming meeting dates, details of the timelines, and the use of the racial equity planning tool, which was brought up at the last public comment. My team's also working closely with the Public Records Office at the city to close out any outstanding record requests that might be as soon as possible. And I will be sure to keep you as the school committee updated on the proposed school merges as we continue engagement throughout this spring. As I always like to promise, we have some bright spots, and this week was no exception, even though it was only 1 week between school committees. I had the opportunity to join Mayor Wu on her announcement of the Office for Youth Engagement and Advancement, which is titled Oh Yeah, which I love. This office will work with the nonprofit organizations and the community organizations throughout the city, and also across city departments, to really reimagine youth work and how our young people experience the city of Boston, all the way from childhood to adulthood. I think, this is a real opportunity for our students to have voice in process, and for students to be able to identify what's working for them and not in the programming that's being offered, and to be able to lean into what students would like to see in that programming. So Pedro Cruz is the new lead for this department, and we're thrilled to be working with them. And so we're going to really look forward to working with Pedro and his staff as they establish the department's priorities in the months to come, and we'll give further update on that. I also wanted to say congratulations. We had a BLS A special announcement was made for our school counselor, Andrea Incarnacio, who just won the Massachusetts Guidance Counselor of the Year. This is amazing. And she was recognized at the Martin Luther King Jr. School Assembly on Friday, the 13th. Andrea will represent Massachusetts in Washington, D.C. at the National School Counselor of the Year Gala. That'll take place next month, and she'll compete with other state winners from around the country for the 2023 American School Counselor Association's School Counselor of the Year Award. We're very proud of Andrea and her commitment year after year to the young people in our system, especially at BLS, and all of the counselors, who play such a key role in helping to support our students' social emotional well-being, as well as college and career. So thank you very much to Andrea. Congratulations to her on her fine work. I had the opportunity to attend the MLK Junior celebration that was held along with Chair Robinson at the Burke High School on January 13th in the evening. Special word of thanks to Director Beatrice, Tony Beatrice, and the whole BPS Arts Department. It really was such a spectacular time. Sorry, it was Thursday evening, rather. And it was such a spectacular time. Mr. Silva, who is the school leader at the Burke, opened everything up. It's such a beautiful auditorium at the Burke, and the sound is wonderful in there. And really, it was just such a showcase of our young people's talents as we celebrated MLK Jr.'s spirit and legacy. And it was, we had performances from the Burke. They have a dance troupe. We had Boston Arts Academy. We had the Kenny, the Edison, Kilmer was there. Orchard Gardens was there. Philbrook was there. Horace Mann School for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing did an amazing musical dance performance. It was unbelievable. And it just was inspiring. O'Brien was in the house. Boston Latin School had their jazz ensemble. So it just was such a wonderful tribute. And again, thank you to Tony, Beatrice, and to Mr. Silva for opening up the Burke and allowing our young people to show their amazing talents. So as far as tonight and the presentation, you're going to you're going to hear another report from the Council of Great City Schools. This is actually the final report due from them. And this is around their findings on safety. The report was initiated, just as a reminder, as a requirement of the Systemic Improvement Plan from DESE. And we actually submitted the report to DESE this afternoon. I'm extremely grateful to Dr. Hart. He just, and his entire team, I know Willie's going to be on, but the entire team just spent so many hours with us and really trying to understand our safety protocols and systems. And really, this is such a key area to help us improve and make sure that we're doing all that we can to keep our students safe. We'll continue to keep you updated on the progress of the implementation of the work, especially if you've had an opportunity to hear directly from Dr. Hart and Willie Burroughs. So in closing, I'd just like to thank you for your time. This is the end of my formal report. I do have the honor of passing it over to our very own Diego Mata. He's going to share with you work that the BSAC, the Boston Student Advisory Council, is doing. And I've, in my time as the high school soup, had opportunity to work with BSAC. Just as a reminder, it's our citywide body of student leaders representing at this point most of the BPS high schools. These members really work hard to think very thoughtfully and to identify and address, student issues that are important to the student body across the schools. And this particular structure, BSAC, really puts students in the role of decisions in helping to inform policy and recommendations for policy for decisions that impact them as students. So, after Diego's presentation, we're happy to take questions. But right now I'm going to turn it over to Diego for him to be able to share the BSAC's work.
Hi. Okay. Thank you, Superintendent Skipper, and for letting me have this presentation. I'm Diego, as some of you know. And I right now go to BA, and there I play the trombone. Can you please move to the next slide? All right, so as you can see in this presentation, BSAC is comprised of 46 students from 20 different schools. And we have here listed all of the schools represented in BSAC. We started meetings in November. Our partnership with the Department of Youth Engagement and Employment through the City of Boston has allowed to have all of our BSAC members be paid. And unfortunately, this wasn't the case in the past, but right now, all BSAC members are getting paid. Can we go to the next slide, please? We have 4 subcommittees, which are working on various projects. The Code of Conduct group is working on developing ways of informing students about policies in the Code of Conduct and what their rights are. The Mental Health and Social Media Subcommittee goal is to research effects of social media on student health and also on part of their academics. This will hopefully provide information on how better to assist students. The participatory budgeting, I'm getting my tongue twisted up. The goal of that is recently we've received a $9,000 donation from Edvestors, and the goal is to create youth-led projects to use this money on. And then the goal of the subcommittee of the adultism one is to dismantle all adultism, and hopefully this will occur through informing adults about adultism. The end goal is to hopefully make a PD course on adultism. Could we please move on to the next slide? Here are some of our highlights so far. I've had the privilege of attending Earthshot with some other BSAC folks. This is us over here attending community events at the Possible Zone. And then the pictures on the right are some of our holiday celebration. And can we go to the next slide? That's it. You can follow us on Instagram. We're working on our page. And you can reach us out, and you can reach out to Denise Rory or adult support at drory@bostonpublicschools.org. Thank you, and I look forward to doing this again.
Thank you very much. That was great. I'll now open it up to questions and discussions from the committee. Please raise your hand. Oops, Dr. Alkins.
Hi, thank you both for the wonderful report. I have a couple of questions in no particular order. My first question is sort of picking up on something that we discussed at our last meeting regarding sort of enrollment for programming that's going to be going on during the winter break. I know it wasn't in the report, but I just wanted to get an update on participation in that, and if we are all set in terms of supports there. And then another question is for Superintendent Skipper. I know we're going to hear a presentation later this evening from the Council of Great City Schools. I'm just curious as into your thinking, particularly as you all are starting to look forward to strategies around policing in our schools, thinking about there's been more of the recent conversation around metal detectors and things of that nature. So I'm curious as to what your staff is doing in thinking about anti-racist practices within your strategy development around that. So I'll stop there with those questions.
Sure. So, so thank you. So, I think for the first one, in terms of the enrollment for the winter break for the breaks, Chief Snyder and Dr. Eccleston, I think the specific question had been around the acceleration academies or any other kinds of programming that would be taking place during in the coordination of that during the winter breaks, particularly with the transformation schools. So I don't know if either of you have a more of an update than what we had last week.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for asking again. So we have a total of 33 schools who are participating in February Acceleration Academies. That's all of our transformation schools, along with a half dozen others or so that really have qualified either due to low MCAS performance or opportunity index scores. Those are all set. Schools select their students. They prioritize students with programmatic needs. So whether those are English learners or students with IEPs, as well as those students who, might need an additional boost or at risk in other ways to participate in that programming. We also have a lot of other partners who are offering February and April vacation programming. Some of that is directly in our schools, but it's completely held by the partner. And then others of those programs are in partnership locations, and they're the places that you might anticipate support. So that might be the YMCA, that might be the Boys and Girls Club, that might be some programs that are held in the libraries. That also we've been encouraging our families and our schools to notify families of all of the free opportunities that exist, like the free passes that are available at the library to take advantage of the Children's Museum, the Science Museum, lots of other attractions and enrichment opportunities that often offer not just like free Fridays, but free opportunities throughout those weeks. So we're promoting those. And as I said, we are in 33 schools, and that does not include our partners who have programming in our schools or in their own locations.
That's great. Dr. Elkins, does that answer your question on the enrollment stuff?
Did you have another question, Dr. Hawkins, or are you all set?
No,
Well,
Dr. Yeah, no,
yeah.
I'm gonna go into the second one. I just wanted to make sure
Okay,
you were all
that's
set on
what I
the
was-
first one. Sorry, it's like the little boxes move around. I couldn't.
Yeah, I know.
Sorry
It's
about
like
that.
So I think first we have been eager to get the report from the Council of Great City Schools, because I think really the advantage to the council doing this level of report is that they work with 78 of the largest school districts. So we feel like there's some best practices that we're going to learn and will be either recommended or not recommended. I think in terms of the metal detectors, we have a process for communities to elect to have metal detectors currently, which is why we have them in some of the schools, and this is a legacy one. And that involves the actual school site council, the school leader, coming together, parent input, student input, to be able to decide whether or not they would like to have the metal detectors at their school. We provide whatever data they're looking for in terms of incidents and so forth as a way for them to be informed about it. I do not know that the racial equity planning tool has been applied to that process. And that would be a recommendation I would have going forward for any new sites, were those to be the school community for that site were to elect it. I think we have taken, I actually had an opportunity to serve on a US Department of Ed panel today. And it was specifically to celebrate some of the best practice we are doing around trauma-informed practice, restorative justice, how we're leveraging social and emotional supports, both SEL in the curriculum, and also how we're leveraging SEL as a strategy to be able to support students moving away from punitive discipline. All of the things that we're working actively on that we believe from a mitigation standpoint really are working to keep our community and our students safe. A big piece of this, obviously, we'll get into as part of the conversation on the Council of Great City Schools report. I think that there will be some decision points for school committee to make that we will bring around what you would like us to explore or to not explore. My understanding is that there was a very large community process that took place that led to where we are right now with school safety specialists in the schools. I think that there's going to be some further recommendation there around additional training, trauma sensitivity, de-escalation, things like that, that certainly we welcome. I also think that as we get into the council reports, there's some other information and recommendations or potential to look at that have legal implication. And I think, I know that Attorney Mackey's on here, and I think it will be good to have that conversation as it presents itself in the report itself. So I think when ultimately we give recommendations, they will come from the report, and they will not be an individual recommendation such as metal detectors. They will be a package of mitigation that we believe is going to best serve the student body of BPS. And right now, that is very much grounded in our SEL work, in our school safety specialists, and in continued PD and training.
No, thank you for that. I think it was just more of a understanding that just seeing where you all were at with understanding the overall like anti-racist approaches for your team and how you all are thinking about school safety in that lens, like overall, of course, metal detectors being one lens of thinking about safety from that. But it is good to hear about your understanding of trauma-informed practices and things like that, restorative justice that we are moving towards and have been moving toward for some time now. So it's good to hear an update. I do have some other questions, but I will wait for a second round. Thank you.
Mr. Cadet Hernandez.
Apologies, I'm just pulling up my questions. My first question is, one, thank you so much for the report, and Diego, also thank you. It was really good to hear your voice tonight in this way. I have some questions about the sort of school closures and mergers that we have heard about. I guess sort of three things, and I'll ask them all together and I'll sort of let you go. Real concerns that we heard from one community, but I wonder if it is the same sort of across the board. So I just want to honor who gets to show up at these public forums. But real concerns around the community engagement process. And I think the question for me, and it's one of these words that now I think has become jargon, like, I think it would be really helpful for us to define what is community engagement. And so like when it comes to mergers, consolidations, or school closures, like what do you think is the type of engagement that we're willing to offer and that we want to deliver on? Because I left the meeting last week thinking everyone uses the word engagement as if we know we're talking about the same thing. And, there was someone last week who talked about paint color versus the design, the square footage of rooms, right? And so, I'm curious from your lens, what do you think is engagement? What is the purpose of engagement? And then like, what should families and stakeholders expect from that process? And then the second question is, and maybe some of that is rooted in the lack of clarity around sort of the definition of community engagement around building utilization. Sort of what is the next step in that process to bring clarity and also, lay the foundation that people need?
Sure. No, it's a great question. Through you, Chair. It's a great question. Because I do think that as we and this holds true with parent engagement, and this holds true with community engagement. And this is exactly why we've sort of also kind of separated them in a way in Ana Tavares' shop. So I'm going to actually ask Ana to also, after I answer, to give her thinking on this, because she's involved in it as well. So I think that I think one thing is that we good family engagement, or community engagement in this case, is about doing what we say we're going to do on the timelines that we say them. And so if we don't do that, then we owe the community an apology and a reset. But I do think it's also clarifying what are the decisions that can be made. So part of this is giving information. And for instance, there are going to be situations where mergers need to happen. And they need to happen because our buildings are outdated. There's no way to get out of the building more than what it is. It is certainly not going to be able to give the type of education that all of our students in BPS deserve. And so merging will enable us to be able to direct resources in a more concentrated way so that all students in that merger are able to benefit from it. However, what that looks like, the timing, the way it's done, the activities to do it, those are all critical pieces that the community can weigh in on. Those are all critical ways that the community can be involved in shaping that experience. And so I think in some cases, that's going to be the decision points. In other cases, there may be more decision to be made where you have multiple buildings, the buildings themselves might have more opportunities. And so there might be more decision around, the election of which school communities are going to go to which buildings. It's going to vary area, like neighborhood by neighborhood as we get into this process. But I think at the onset, it's going to be important to give the information we have, to be as transparent with the information, and to be as transparent as we can with what we believe is the edges of the decision-making that's possible for that community. Anna, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add or compliment to that?
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity to respond. And my apologies for not being on camera, just wonky internet, but we're going to move forward. And I appreciate the opportunity and the question around what is engagement. I loved that question because you're right. School committee member Cardette Hernandez, you really hit that out of the park. The way we define it versus the way community defines it and the way schools define it can sometimes catch us in those intricate little differences. And I feel like Superintendent Skipper really hit it on the nose when she said, if we're attempting to really have conversations with community and they are letting us know that they're not feeling engaged, then we have to really reflect on what does that mean? And a lot of work is happening behind the scenes, not just from the community meeting that we had where a group of parents are sharing their experience, but also because we know that we always have to strive to do better. And I'm going to invite Chief Snyder to share a few more details, but just know that it takes an entire village to really do engagement well at the school level, at the district level, at the city level, and even I would say at the school committee level. All of us are part of that engagement, and we're really committed to supporting the work, especially around the mergers, and really defining and being really transparent about where we want family input and where it is that we're coming with a decision, because I think those nuances are really critical as well. But Chief Snyder, if you want to join as well, please.
Sure, thank you again. It's engagement means, as you said, a lot of things to a lot of different people. And we think of authentic engagement in a number of ways. It's two-way communication, right? So we're not just putting stuff out there without actually listening to the needs of families and students. It's timely, it's transparent, it's consistent, and it reaches, right? And I think this is one of the things that it's a whole area where all of us need to get better at it. We can look at one department and, we can model it. We need to build capacity among our teams and in our schools and with our families to also raise that bar. But if we talk about with regard specifically to mergers, Superintendent Skipper is right on that. We need to be transparent and do a much better job than we've been doing around what is a space for shared decision making and what is not, and if it's not, why? We've got to be so transparent around all of our issues, the state of our buildings, our enrollment, why different spaces are better for our kids academically, right? So, you know, I'd like to say that, you know, in some ways we do this work well, but this isn't a one department project. This is capital planning, and this is academics, and this is community engagement, and this is our city government partners, and we all have to get on the same page. And we recognize it. We know we haven't done well. Our commitment is to continue to do better.
It's interesting. I hear it, and I'm saying this with so much love. I'm saying this as someone who's like worked in policy spaces, has been a principal, who's also a parent, who's on the school committee. It still feels really wonky. And so like, while the answer was the answer, I'm just like, for whatever it is worth, I don't know if I'm leaving this conversation any clearer about what community engagement means. And I think I wonder two things. I think, you know, some of it is around the process that, like, what I left last week feeling is we're not clear about sort of the what and the why around the mergers. And so I don't think people are clear about that. And, you know, sometimes it's that a building's outdated, but also sometimes you're merging into a building that's outdated. And so there has to be like some like intellectual honesty that like the mergers are not happening where folks are moving into refreshed and refined buildings, that the mergers are happening so that there's other sort of trickle down projects that can occur to right size the system. You know, we all probably saw the Globe op-ed this week that said maybe, you know, we're 16 schools over what we need to be. And that is not sort of the North Star, but I think absent of a master plan, we're going to continue to have these moments where people are very confused around why them, and then very confused what their role is in the process. And for me as a parent, what I would want the engagement to look like is a very clear why, the sort of rationale as to why this is happening, and deep clarity around the decision points that I'm being asked to participate in versus the ones that have been made. And so that we're not wasting people's time, we're not, you know, lying to people and being like, we want to hear how you feel and what you're thinking and what's going on, when like, we may not want to hear what you're thinking or what you're feeling or what's going on, because we've already started to execute a plan. And, you know, working parent, you start to lose us when we're wasting time engaging in a process that we don't really have input in, so that when the time comes for us to really inform decisions and outcomes, we've already left the table because it didn't feel like the approach was authentic. And I know we don't have a master plan yet. And I also know that I'm over time. So, but I'm just curious, like, as I say that directionally, like, you know, is there something short of a master plan that we can deliver to help further clarify the rationale behind mergers? And then at the same time, is there something we can offer the current communities who are in conversations real clarity around what the existing decision points are for them in the engagement process?
Yeah. So I think to your latter point, I think that is something that, as I kind of addressed in my SUSE report, that is something that in the February 1st or before then communication needs to be very clearly spelled out. I think orally in the meetings, the community meetings that have happened, much of that has been, but again, it's also about updating the whole community, not just the community that can be there on a given night, right? And, you know, so I think it's, and on the district side, this is also building our capacity. And that is, because this is different than regular facilities work. This is very much about a community process with a facility component, but it has lots of other components. It has academic programming components, it has transportation components, so that has taken us, we did not have those things in place in the way they needed to be. That's one of the things that we've worked and are working to put into place, so that as more of these conversations happen, as we get back several of the larger reports around the conditions of the buildings and around the K-6 study and the 7-12 study, we are set up with an infrastructure to be able to move more rapidly and support in the way that you're talking about, in the timelines, in the boundaries of the what's and the whys, and then in facilitating the dialogue for the things that can be genuinely engaged on.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Tran.
Hi, I'm first of all, thank you to Member Garnet Hernandez concerns regarding community engagement, and I believe that that point is valid. We've been talking about community engagement and transparency for the last 2,000 years. And we have never come to an agreement or have never come to something that we all could agree upon. So I hate to be a rabble rouser, but I'd like to hear, aside from Member Garnet Hernandez testimony, let's say, I'd like to hear all members share their heartfelt and truthful, regardless of the politics or whatever, what is the nooks and crannies of community engagement, and how do we define it in a way that we could come to some sort of a unanimity, and then we go on from there, because this is a point of a contention that has been there through so many chairmanship. So there should be some kind of a consensus between the school committee and the administration, the school administration, regarding what are the criteria of community engagement, and what are the transparency type of procedures that we can follow, given all the taking into account all the legal or social concerns, privacy or whatever, because this has been raising many times. And
Yeah.
it's time for us to, if there's a need for us to sit down and work out something that we can agree to abide by, then let's do it. Otherwise, this point is going to be there.
Yeah.
And it has come to my attention that it has been a point of contention between the school committee, the school administration,
The city.
and the community at large.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I just want to say thank you, Mr. Tran, for that comment, and I hope that we will be able to put this on our agenda as a formal presentation and conversation at a future meeting. So thank you very much for that suggestion. Thank you. I'll go to Mr. O'Neill and then circle back around. Oh, then Mr. Maida, and then go back around.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate the conversation. I actually, Mr. Maida, I appreciate your presentation, and I have a quick question for you. The beauty of BSAC is that when it represents all of our high schools, and that you have a wide variety of voices. And so is the district being helpful to BSAC in having representation from all the high schools? And what else can we do to help BSAC be as robust as possible? Sorry to put you on the spot like that, but I
No,
appreciate hearing your report tonight.
I'm gonna call Denise for some help on this.
So Chief Snyder, if you can just talk about the supports from that we provide to the youth council.
He actually means Denise Rory, if she's here. Denise
Yeah.
Rory and her team work directly with Diego
Oh,
and
okay.
BSAC.
Yes. Sorry for not making that clear.
That's all right. That I'm honored, but I know that she served you so
Okay.
well. So
She said she's
And if
not
it's
on
not
right now.
possible, if it's
Uh,
not possible, Mr. Maida, to get that answer, maybe you can just think about it and let us know at our next meeting. Would love to
I-
make sure you're getting all the support you need.
All right, I
Yeah.
can. She told me to just answer, so I'll try it too. Okay. So I feel right now we do not have we don't have a person from every school at the moment. I feel that's mainly an issue of either outreach or it's probably an issue of outreach, honestly. I'm gonna be honest.
Okay. Well, obviously, it was a period of transition, right? And so
Mhm.
now that you're getting your feet back under you, and by you, I mean the organization overall, it would be great if the district, don't be afraid to ask more support from the district to make sure the school superintendents are involved.
Yeah.
Obviously, the
I think-
superintendent knows this very well from her time overseeing the high schools.
Yeah.
And I trust, Superintendent, you want it to be a very robust organization, having
Correct.
voices from all of our different high schools, because the students bring a variety of perspective from the different schools.
Yeah. So I see that Denise Rory's on, and what I will say in the past, what we've done is at the high school meeting, we've had BSAC come and present for the high school leaders. We identify for the high school leaders who is still missing representation and have them work with their school counselors to be able to get nominations for it. That's how we've been able to work in the past. So Denise, I don't know if you want to chime in too. Denise Rory is on now.
Hi, everyone. I'm Denise Rory. Great job, Diego. So thank you, Mr. O'Neill, for the question. So, the district has been supportive of BSAC, but I will say that we have had a lot of capacity issues since kind of the reestablishment of BSAC. So we're working to get our office better staffed. As of right now, I'm the only full-time staff member supporting the council. So first on the docket is to hire some additional staff to support the capacity in terms of outreach. Our school counselors were amazing supports in getting young people into BSAC this school year who maybe don't fit the typical student profile. And so I think that was a great way for us to inform other students about BSAC and get some schools on the docket that weren't on the docket for BSAC in the past. Obviously, you can see we have some gaps, but again, I think most of that is to capacity, not being able to do all the follow-up, not being able to do all of the school visits and outreach that BSAC has done in the past when they were at full capacity. But I'm super hopeful that, between summer and next fall, we'll be able to have full representation.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Of course.
Thank you, Ms. Rory, and thank you, Mr. Maida.
Mr. Maida.
Yeah, so I was I'd like to say with what Mr. Cardet Hernandez was saying, I was just gonna mimic that. I wholeheartedly agree with everything he's saying. And also to the point Mr. Alkins was making about metal detectors, I am still left a little bit confused. Like, is the district still supporting the idea of implementing more? And if not, or if so, rationale? And honestly, I'm confused on that. Just
Sure. So I can try to clarify for you, Diego. So right now, there are some schools that have metal detectors. There was a policy, a protocol that was in place on the district side for how the metal detectors got to those schools. In most of the cases, those schools are using their metal detectors. There have since been some schools that have requested metal detectors, and they've gone through the process that's in the circular. That is still active. That is an active way that if a school community is looking to get a metal detector, asks advice about getting metal detectors, we can point them to that circular. We can share with them data on incidences if that's something that will help their community to have that conversation. And then they, if that is something they're seeking and they use the process that's laid out, then we provide the metal detectors. I think that one piece that was missing in the original kind of rollout of metal detectors was that it never went through the racial equity planning tool because it didn't exist. And so that will be something that I think we're going to want to look at so that we don't have an equity issue in the district of who has metal detectors and who does not, who has to go through them and who does not. That is the issue with a district-wide policy, is that there might be some schools who are either very small, who are very large, who have a lot of incidents, who don't have a lot of incidences in and around the school. And so really, we probably need to go back to that circular. We need to look at it and we need to decide and potentially recommend for school committee that we want to be able to add the racial equity planning tool to it. So right now, we are not making any formal recommendations on it. But that is why and how the metal detectors are in the schools and have been in the schools from a legacy standpoint. We wanted to get the council's full report so that we weren't just seeing metal detectors as the main thing for safety, but rather it is a body of things that need to be done in conjunction to keep a community safe. So I'm sorry that I didn't explain that well the first time, Diego.
And secondly, thank you for explaining that, by the way.
Sure.
Secondly, do we have a timeline for when this goes through the racial equity planning tool? And will the ones that are and will the metal detectors in the schools that are currently in the schools go through the racial equity planning tool, or will they instead be grandfathered in? Because information, and hopefully we don't do that. That's
correct. So thanks, Diego. These are all the same questions, right, that we're starting to kick around. The council's report just came to us. So I think part of tonight is to be able to start to have the school committee and the public digest some of the recommendations. We're doing the same. And certainly as part of the implementation of that council report, we will be looking at metal detectors, best practice around metal detectors, which is one of the things that is actually mentioned in the report, and perhaps Dr. Hart can speak to that. So we will be undertaking all of this thinking that you are so, you always amaze me with how observant you are and spot on about the types of questions that need to be asked. So these are the right questions, and we will be asking them and considering them as we make recommendations as part of a whole package on school safety. So I don't have a specific timeline because the council report is just come, but this is something for this school year that we are grappling with.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
There were hands raised. Do people want to come back to their questions, or do you want to pause and let's move on with the meeting? Not sure. Okay, Dr. Elkins, you're back. Okay.
No, I just meant we can move on. It would have been getting deeper into something else. So yeah.
Yes, thank you. I just have one comment I want to make. I think so we've talked, we continue to talk a little bit about policies, school committee policies, and there are a number I believe we really need to go back and relook at, and a number that we're actively using that, again, were put in place long before there was the racial equity planning tool.
That's right.
So I feel that we'll have to put a pin in that and come back to figure out, which of our most current policies that would really benefit from some work around, their changes as well as utilizing the racial equity planning tool as we begin to look at some of the deeper work, particularly around safety and other issues in the district. So we'll come back to that at another point, but thank you.
That's great.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, I'll now entertain a motion to receive the superintendent's report. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second,
Thank you. Is there any discussion or objection to the motion? Ms. Sullivan, will you please call the roll?
Excuse me, one moment, Chair. Dr. Alkins,
Yes.
Mr. Cadet Hernandez,
Yes.
Ms. Lopera, Ms. Polanco Garcia, Mr. Tran,
yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson.
Yes,
The superintendent's report is approved unanimously.
thank you. And I also want to thank Mr. Maida for his report, and that we look forward to getting more updates from you in the future. We'll now move on to general public comment. Ms. Sullivan?
Thank you, Chair. The public comment period is an opportunity for parents, caregivers, students, and other concerned parties to make brief presentations to the school committee on pertinent school issues. Questions on specific school matters are not answered at this time, but may be referred to the superintendent for later response. Questions on specific policy matters are not answered at this time, but may be the subject of later discussion by the committee. We have 14 speakers this evening. Each person will have 3 minutes to speak, and I will remind you when you have 30 seconds remaining. Those who require interpretation services will receive an additional 2 minutes. Speakers may not reassign their time to others. Large groups addressing the same topic are encouraged to consolidate their remarks or choose a spokesperson to provide testimony. Written testimony is appreciated and encouraged. Please state your name, affiliation, and what neighborhood you are from before you begin. Please direct your comments to the chair and refrain from addressing individual school committee members or district staff. When I call your name, please raise your hand virtually in Zoom. And please make sure you're signed into Zoom with the same name that you used to sign up for public comment. That will allow us to identify you when it's your turn to testify. We'll begin this evening with Jessica Tang, followed by Antoinetta Brownell, Mike Heischman, Caroline Jones, Aaron Johnson, and Monique Bino. If you could please raise your hands virtually. Jessica Tang.
Good evening, Chair Robinson, Superintendent, members of the school committee. As you know, I'm here tonight to raise further awareness of an ongoing issue that has impacted thousands of BTU educators. The issue at hand is educators being denied wages they are legally entitled to and having not received pay that they were due many weeks ago. Over the last few months, educators have experienced an unprecedented set of problems with getting paid for their work by BPS, even for work completed over this past summer. There have been continual and chronic errors in their pay and/or they have not been paid in a timely manner. Teachers and paraprofessionals have regularly had to wait up to 6 months or more for payments of stipends, settlements, or for errors to be corrected. This is tantamount to wage theft and it needs to be resolved right away. We have been patient, listened to explanations, and have waited for resolutions, but the latest announcement of another delay in retro pay to mid-February after promises of disbursement on January 20th for a tentative agreement we reached last July is beyond unacceptable. We have no choice but to speak up and to demand accountability and recourse. Tonight, you will be hearing from educators describing the myriad of issues and the impact of those issues they've had on them, their families, and many whom are also BPS students. These educators are not asking for anything more than what they are already due. If staff even get a response from BPS on some of these matters, it is oftentimes incorrect, and we have to follow up again. And to give you a sense of just how bad the issues have been, we gathered some data. We have been using something called a tracker where issues are entered into a shared document with the Office of Human Capital to ensure the issues addressed. It goes back all the way to 2016, but just to give you an example, in school year 2018 through 19, Over a 12-month period, there were 197 tracker items. School
I'm
year
sorry,
19-20
I'm sorry, I have to interrupt. You're speaking way too fast, please.
No problem. In school year 19 through 20, there were 174. In school year 20 to 21, there were 201. In school year 21 through 22, there were 315. This should have been a warning sign. In school year 22 to 23 to date, in just 5 months, there are already 345 items. We have 7 more months to go. We have had more problems with OHC and payroll issues in less than 5 months this school year than in any previous entire school year since we started using the tracker system in 2015.
30 seconds.
This doesn't even include all of the other outstanding contract implementation items. It is drastically undercounting even pay issues because many members don't even bring all of their issues. And some single items include whole job categories like the family liaisons who still have not all had a correct pay stub this school year yet. It includes adult learning centers, para subs, teachers, so many more. I've recently compared the unprecedented issues to the Southwest flight disaster after waiting on the phone for over 12 hours to get help. But to my horror, the more I've learned, the more I realize just how fitting that comparison has been. I believe the systems that BPS and the city of Boston are being totally outdated. You're going to hear more from the educators, but at the end of the day, I'll send the whole testimony. We need recourse. We need an audit of OHC and payroll in the city of Boston. We need our lowest paid employees to receive their retro pay before mid-February. We need to get family liaisons pay corrected once and for all. And we really need to make sure the district and city does not allow this ever to happen again. If we want to attract and retain educators so that our students have what they need to succeed, we have to begin by treating them with respect.
Thank you, Ms. Tang. Our next speaker is Antoinetta Brownell.
Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Antoinetta Brownell. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. I am here as a BPS educator, just wanting to voice some concern. I wanted to just give you a glimpse into my classroom. I teach K0, K1, so I teach 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. I went into this year being very optimistic that things were going to be different, that I was actually going to be able to teach and these kids were going to be able to develop. Mid-year, December, my paraprofessional quit because she said that the job was just too difficult and that there was not enough support for 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. I am here right now, however, just to kind of advocate that, as a teacher, regardless of whether or not I have the support or I have what I need to do my job, I'm still told to do my job no matter what, and to do it excellently and with fidelity as I should. And I am just asking that the OHC have the same standard. It would not be okay if I didn't get report cards out on time because I told a parent, oh, sorry, my para just quit. I can't get it done. Or, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't have time to change your child's diaper because we were short-staffed. I don't think that would go over well with parents. So the district should have the same standard. This is just the tipping point of what I call the waiting game with BPS. So far this year, aside from our retro pay, many things have still not happened and we have to wait. Too much waiting and enough is enough. Waiting for ESSER funds to be released. Waiting for work orders in the schools to be completed. Waiting for buses to arrive on time. Waiting for ELT fund supplies to arrive or orders even placed. Waiting on wipes that were ordered to special education that have still not been delivered. These are necessary to take care of our littles. Waiting still for inclusion to actually be implemented correctly. However, the district is placing more and more children in inclusion classrooms with high needs without the support because we are being told to wait for the planning team. However, BPS is not waiting on placing children who have high needs in classrooms where there's not enough support to meet their needs. Waiting for people who have accepted job positions, my para role, to actually start working. I am worried that it'll be about 3 months for her to get hired. I have no para right now. It is unsafe, yet I have to wait months before someone can actually get hired. I want to say that my principal and staff at the school has been very supportive and have done everything that they possibly can to support me and my kids. Teachers are required to do things with excellence and fidelity, and
Could you
so
please wrap up?
and so should BPS. BPS should be excellent, and right now it's not. I feel that OHC, I feel like this is a broken system and it should be fixed. Thank you for letting me share.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mike Heichman.
Mike Heichman, Beige at Dorchester. Our lives begins end the day we become silent about things that matter. Reverend King. The silence of the good people is more dangerous than the brutality of the bad people. Reverend King. On August 24th of last year, 15 high-ranking retired BPS educators of color had sent a letter to the new superintendents protesting against the targeting, harassment, and firing of anti-racist Black and Brown central office leaders. Great harm has been done. Another woman of color with an important position at central office resigned this month. Why? Maybe there was a positive reason, or maybe this is another example of the results of a toxic racist culture at central office. I have repeatedly requested that organizational demographic charts of central office be released to the public. We have a right to see what central office looked like when Dr. Cassellius was our superintendent, how that changed when Ms. Skipper took office, and what it looks like today. What has happened to the independent investigation, which began last August? It's now January 18th, a new year. Once again, the school committee patiently waits for the report. You wait and wait, say nothing, and do nothing. Has racial equality at central office been demoted and defunded? Your silence enables white supremacy and racism. Under Dr. Cassellius' leadership, the school committee boldly approved a process that has encouraged a more diverse group of students to enter our exam schools. The MAP test this year will count as 30% of the applicant score. This exam could be taken in either English or Spanish. Now central office has decided that the students can only take this test in English. Why has this policy been changed? Where is the equity analysis? Would this have happened if anti-racist Black and Brown central office staff had not been removed or demoted? Racism thrives at the top of the hierarchy. Will the school committee once again remain silent? All of us want all of our children to attend modern 21st century buildings. The official narrative is that we need larger schools, which means closing smaller schools. Larger schools save money and are easier for central office to control. Research, however, shows that small schools are better. The declining enrollment means that we now have the space to have 21st century buildings and smaller schools. I request that the department conduct an equity analysis of this move towards larger schools and a report be given to the school committee and the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Caroline Jones.
Hello. Good evening, Chair Robinson and Boston School Committee. My name is Caroline Jones. I'm a grade 3 teacher at Up Academy, Dorchester in BPS, and I reside in Brockton, Mass. I'd like to begin with a recent metric that I found while I was searching about inflation. I'd like you to keep this number at the forefront of your mind throughout what I say about retroactive pay and how important it is that we receive it soon. So while inflation has cooled in recent months, the typical household spent $371 more on goods and services just this past December than a year ago. And that metric is from Moody's Analytics. So again, please keep that at the forefront of your mind. Throughout September and October of 2022, the BTU members, we were told that our retroactive pay would be distributed in 2 lump sums, likely in November and December. Then we were told that we would receive it by the 20th of this month, which is this week's payroll, in the next day or so. Just last week, as we have already heard tonight, we were told that the district and the city are optimistic about distributing it next month by the February 17th payroll, which we heard from Superintendent Skipper. We were told that the district is working hard, but the staffers are required to do the work manually. We were also told that the payroll staffers are even working nights and weekends to quickly expedite our retroactive pay. This timeline for me and for the BTU members is really embarrassing, unacceptable, and it's disrespectful. I'm thinking, imagine if I said this to my 3rd grade students this year. Just think of these quotes if I sat in front of my 8 and 9-year-olds in our city of Boston. I planned on teaching you reading by November or December, but our classroom systems, library, and photocopies are old. They're antiquated, and sometimes they don't work. I need another month to just figure out our reading lessons. But now it's January, and I still cannot teach you reading until the middle of February because I have to implement all of our reading lessons manually. Even with me working long nights and weekends, I'm still not ready to teach you reading. But I'm optimistic that I'll be ready to teach you next month. I cannot promise you, though, that I will. We are not allowed to make excuses. The district and the payroll office should not be allowed either.
30 seconds.
You have failed to honor your word. Please do what you need to do to expedite our retroactive pay. We have already earned it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Aaron Johnson.
Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. My name is Aaron Johnson. I'm in my 11th year teaching in BPS at Boston International High School Newcomers Academy, known as BINCA. I am also a teacher with a law degree. And my comments, well, of course, I'm totally incensed about the problems around retro pay that my colleagues and President Tang have already discussed. I'm here just to speak briefly about teachers with law degrees. In our new contract, our JDs are recognized, finally, like any other doctorate for salary purposes. But the Office of Human Capital seems to be in an alternate reality. OHC is not honoring the new contract, like the contract never changed, with OHC officials continuing to recite the now obsolete rule of a mere 1-lane bump. It's like they never got the memo, like the new contract doesn't exist. It's completely dumbfounding. Many of us have given up lucrative careers to teach in Boston Public Schools. And as I'm sure you know, it's plenty hard enough to find qualified teachers. If you haven't seen it by now, check out the New York Times from November 18th. The piece called "Empty Classrooms, Abandoned Kids Inside America's Great Teacher Resignation." Again, New York Times, November 18th, 2022. This is more than just delays or mistakes with our retroactive raises. This issue that we teachers with law degrees are facing, this is an issue of BPS explicitly and knowingly repudiating a binding legal agreement. And when it comes to violating a contract, it's not advisable to mess with 30+ attorneys. So you've all been notified. And I ask you urgently, please tell OHC to do its job. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. And thank you to our speakers for speaking at a slower pace for our interpreters. Next, we'll hear from Monique Bino, followed by Chris Buttimer, Stephanie Aguayo, Theodore Smith, Tyrone Francis, Cheryl Buckman, and Sherry Kelleher. If you could all please raise your hands virtually in Zoom. Monique.
Monique Fine, K2 inclusion teacher at the Concord School in Northside in South Florida. I'm here today with the hope that you can hear my message that the public school system does not support or value its teachers in meaningful ways that promote job satisfaction and teacher retention. I will illustrate how the system is mistreating its employees can have a very real and dire consequence for our students. Because I am an inclusion teacher, this means that I have up to 20 students in my classroom, and 5 of these students have documented disabilities and an individualized education plan. I'm responsible for implementing this plan using my teaching license in special education. In addition, I have been asked by leadership at my school to use a 3rd teaching license that I hold, called an ESL license, in order to provide language services to students in my classroom whose first language is not English. This allows for English learners to remain in my classroom and to receive language services without having to transition to another classroom and without missing core instruction. This consistency was an added benefit for our English learners, as some also have IEPs. Per our contract, 3 of my colleagues and I were supposed to receive a stipend for taking on this additional responsibility during the school year ending in June 2022. We are still waiting for this money. We spent hours of our lives emailing leadership, BTU, filing grievances, and attending hearings, just so that we can be paid for work that was completed over 7 months ago. On November 19th, we received a decision from the hearing officer, Ed Lee, stating that BPS would pay us our monies owed. 2 more months have passed since this decision, and even after emailing the CFO of Boston Public Schools, we still have not received a response or a timeline for payment. We are still waiting for this money. The message is clear to us. BPS does not value our work enough to ensure that we are paid in a timely manner for work completed. To say that we feel undervalued would be an understatement. My 3 colleagues and I have collectively been teaching in Boston for 70 years. Our experience and expertise appear to mean nothing, as we now have to fight to be paid in a timely and accurate manner. When I spoke of dire consequences for the students of Boston, I am saying this because if BPS continues to treat its employees this way, there will be no employees left. This is just my story. I hope for a better future. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Chris Buttimer.
Greetings, can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great, thank you. My name is Chris Buttimer. I live in Cambridge, and I am a specialist in BPS's Teaching Fellowship. The Teaching Fellowship is part of the Teacher Pipeline programs, which are designed to recruit, develop, and retain primarily educators of color from the community who want to teach in BPS. The pipeline programs were listed as the #1 strength in the most recent BPS audit conducted by DESE. Since I officially began working in the pipeline programs this past August, BPS has pushed out two of my bosses, Dr. Saren Daly and Dr. Abdi Ali, two veteran Black educators with decades of service to BPS. They've begun dismantling my department, Recruitment, Cultivation, and Diversity, or RCD, comprised primarily of educators of color. And perhaps the most egregiously, in terms of its stated mission of retaining equity-oriented educators of color, it has yet to pay our first-year teaching fellows, 24 out of 25 of whom are teachers of color. There are $3,000 and $4,000 stipends, which should have been paid in August or September at the latest. Additionally, it is yet to reimburse BPS educators, 9 out of 11 of whom are educators of color, for an educational trip that BPS canceled last summer. A trip BPS itself told us would have benefited.
Please slow down a bit.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
A trip BPS itself has told us would have benefited our teachers' ability to teach English learners more effectively. It has also failed to pay many of my colleagues in the pipeline programs, in MTEL support, and in other parts of RCD for work they did last summer, payments totaling in the tens of thousands. Finally, BPS owes another colleague and me $12,500 each for work we did last June to create cutting-edge digital teaching simulations to train our bilingual educators in our pipeline programs. Regardless of the intentions or justifications of people behind the aforementioned actions, the material effect of these non-payments and other acts is systemic institutional racism, since they disproportionately affect educators of color. Further, the fact that BPS doesn't pay its employees on time, or even at all in some cases, is already out in the community, and it will make it even harder than it already is to recruit culturally and linguistically diverse teachers to BPS.
30 seconds.
For a district that claims to be anti-racist, the evidence in just my 6 months here screams otherwise. Rectify this situation and pay our educators now. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephanie is not signed into the meeting, so our next speaker will be Theodore Smith.
All right, good afternoon. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good evening. Good evening. I'm Theodore Smith. I teach Marine Corps Junior ROTC I teach Marine Corps Junior ROTC at Madison Park. I've taught there for 5 years, ever since I retired from the Marine Corps after 20 years of active duty service. I have been underpaid by BPS in September of 2020. In September 2020, my pay was reduced by 29%. After 2 years of emails, grievances, and finally arbitration, the arbitrator decided that our pay should include the additional pay for the extra hours that we worked because Madison Park is in turnaround. So that decision was made October 30th, 2022. We did not appeal the decision, and we waited 30 days to see if BPS was going to appeal. They did not. On this most recent pay, I did see that I received some back pay, but there was no explanation whatsoever about what that back pay was, and it is not enough to cover those 2 years of underpayment. The last direct communication I've had from the payroll office was on March 8th, 2022, when the payroll director had a question about a pay change I submitted, but no action was taken after that communication. Simple communication would clear up a lot of these issues just by telling us what's going to happen and when, and then holding BPS to that timeline. Just to be clear, I do not work for the Marine Corps. I'm retired from the Marine Corps. I work for BPS. I just want to make sure we know that. Waiting 2.5 years, let alone 3 months to correct employees' pay is just wrong. That's all I have to say about that.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Tyrone Francis.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, good evening.
My name is Tyron Francis. I currently live in Middletown, Rhode Island. In June of 2019, I retired from the United States Marine Corps after 24 years of honorable and faithful service. I was hired as a JRTC teacher or instructor at Madison Park Technical Vocational High School in September of 2019. 3 days before Christmas of 2020, BPS reduced my pay 32% with no explanation or justification. When I called to find out what happened, I spoke with the director of pay, Bonnie Mines Wallace, and she told me that a new chief financial officer was hired and he interpreted my pay differently. After nearly 2 years of grievances at different levels, my case finally went to arbitration in June of 2022. In October of 2022, the arbitrator ruled in my favor that BPS was to change my pay effective immediately and pay back pay of over $17,000 that I have not received. As of today, I still have not received my money. I have reached out to BPS through numerous phone calls and emails and have received no response. At this point, my biggest concern, other than the money that is owed to me, is the lack of communication. I will never get back the time spent fighting for what was always owed to me. When I retired from the military, I wanted to continue in the field where I could leave a lasting impact on the next generation. BPS has made that difficult by drastically reducing my pay and refusing to fix it, even after an independent arbitrator ordered them to do so. At this point, I would just like to be notified of how and when my pay will be updated. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Cheryl Buckman, followed by Sherry Kelleher, Nathan Ekstrom, Eric Estevez, and Hani Murad. If you could please raise your hands virtually. Cheryl?
Good evening. My name is Cheryl Buckman. I'm a member of BPS Families for COVID Safety, otherwise known as FAMCOSA. I'm a parent to a 4th grade child at the Dever Elementary in Dorchester. He also has special needs. And I'm a resident of South Boston. My son, as we know, is a special needs student who rides the school bus daily and is a door-to-door pickup. What we know is that transportation has been a citywide problem that is only getting worse. Boston Public Schools is one of the oldest in the districts in the nation, and it's also the largest in the state of Massachusetts. In recent years, transportation has gotten worse. These problems range from driver strikes to COVID, bus and driver and monitor shortages, and the most famous month-long Orange Line shutdown. Right now, BPS has 19 different morning start times and 25 dismissals. It has been proposed that BPS tailor that down just to 3 and reevaluate which special needs students meet the requirements for its door-to-door service. That could mean students like my son would have to walk or take alternative transportation to get to school each day. This would greatly impact a household in which neither parent drives, or where a parent would have to adjust their work schedules to fit their child's school schedule. Absent rates would increase due to lack of transportation for these specific students. What does BPS need to do before such a drastic change? BPS needs to engage with the parent community. Start by holding virtual sessions on proposed changes. Listen to this community feedback. The community is the key to helping fix the issues that lie within the school system. But remember, the community that will be mostly impacted with this will be those on an IEP 504 plan. Don't leave them out in the cold. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Sherry Kelleher.
Can you all hear me?
Yes, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you all for taking my testimony. My name is Sherry Kelleher. I'm a resident of Charlestown. I have a son at Boston Latin, and I had two sons who attended the Warren Prescott. I have a lot of questions, and I don't see you guys providing a lot of clear and concise answers. I look at things like the quality framework, and it looks like some of the data may have been updated, but most of it seems from 2019. There's things like student framework answers, but it doesn't say what percentage of the students responded, what percentage of the teachers, what percentage of the parents. So I look at these quality ratings and they don't mean anything. For example, the Warren Prescott and the Elliott, both of which are in my district, show up as having a more rigorous curriculum than Boston Latin. That doesn't make any sense to me as somebody who has children who attended both. How do you come up with those kind of metrics? How are we supposed to make good decisions as to what school we want to send our children to if we don't have meaningful quality metrics? We have no idea what your end state is for the Green New Deal, which seems to be Build BPS just reformulated. What are you trying to achieve? What schools are you going to enclose? How are you going to proceed to do this? Based on what decisions? Where is that being laid out? I'm a consumer of Boston Public Schools. I fund Boston Public Schools as a taxpayer. I don't know what you guys are doing. And then to hear that you aren't paying your teachers? As a child of educators, I find that extremely offensive. I don't understand what the role of the Boston School Committee is versus what the superintendent is doing versus what the district central office is doing versus what the individual schools have the power over. Are you guys going to lay that out for us so that we can clearly see that, so we understand what's going on and who is accountable? It'd be nice 14 years into this process to have a better understanding of what you're doing and to feel confident that you're turning the ship around. But we don't know what your priorities are. We don't know how you're going to address them. So please, please try to pull this together and communicate. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Nathan Ekstrom.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thanks. So my name is Nathan Ekstrom. I'm an ESL teacher at Boston Adult Technical Academy. I've been there for 10 years, and I'm a parent of a K-1 student at the BTU Pilot School. I live there in Jamaica Plain. I want to talk about the situation at my school. Right now, there are somewhere in the ballpark of $50,000 worth of unpaid stipends that are waiting for processing. And these stipends were submitted starting back in October, and it's January now. And so I've been working with the principal and trying to figure out what's going on. I'm also the building rep, union building rep for our school. And it doesn't seem to be the fault of the principal, not the fault of the administrative assistants. I've watched the administrative assistant resubmit paperwork, write emails to payroll that go unanswered, leave voicemails with payroll that go unreturned. So that's the situation at our school. Unrelated to my school, I personally taught an ESL MTEL prep course this summer and was promised a stipend of $2,500 for the work. In the fall, when it became clear that I wasn't going to be paid for my work, I had to organize with fellow teachers, put public pressure on BPS, and we finally got paid in January after a long campaign. And so for me, it doesn't seem like it should be necessary to wage a public campaign to be paid for work that you've completed. And I guess my message for the school committee is that my concern is that this is what teachers are talking about these days, right? The stories that you've heard tonight are common. it's affecting morale. This is what, teachers talk to each other about. And it wasn't always this way. I've been in BPS for 10 years. There's something wrong with payroll. I don't know what the school committee can do to fix it, but it's broken. And the reputation of Boston Public Schools is suffering. And I feel terrible because I'm a parent of a BPS student. I want to work in BPS for the rest of my career. But teachers and staff are losing faith that BPS is able to fulfill its basic functions of an employer. So thank you very much for your time. And I hope there's something that can be done.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Eric Estevez.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Eric Estevez. I'm a Roxbury resident, parent of a former BPS student, and the board chair of EMK, a high school focused on health careers. All children deserve a safe, loving, and supportive learning environment to help them succeed and thrive. Full stop. I lead with safety, and I'll follow that with this. More police in schools is not the answer. Full stop. I think the debate about police presence in schools is both nuanced and complicated. Yes, there are very serious security and safety concerns that must be addressed at all times. And frankly, some schools in big cities need special attention when it comes to safety. And the list of concerns that a Boston resident might raise can run the gamut, from bullying to fights to assaults to more violent acts. However, an increase in safety and an increase in the perception of safety, I think, are two very different and distinct things. I'm from an era that saw the school to prison pipeline explode as a result of no excuse policies, the over-policing of Black bodies, and students being arrested for both criminal and non-criminal behaviors and violations of school policy that were never meant to be arrestable offenses. I think no excuse policies are a form of violence, and zero tolerance policies disproportionately impact youth of color in particular by placing them on a pathway to the justice system. These are not evidence-based practices and not what we should be doing and conforming to in 2023. I think they will exacerbate racial divides and harm children. Yes, there is research that suggests the presence of officers does not significantly impact youth criminality and deters aggression, but there's not enough concrete evidence and overwhelming, statistically significant evidence that more officers in schools impact school safety. It's not clear cut. And I also pose this question to both the school committee and the Boston City Council. What do we want our schools to be? We all are familiar with the phrase, the school to prison pipeline, but do we want our schools to return to being a feeder system? It's a fact that there's a direct link in the expansion of officers in schools that's tied to an increase in federal funding in the aftermath of the Columbine High School shooting, which also coincided with a decrease in juvenile crime and violence. So how do we reconcile these things? I think reimagining public safety requires hard work, resources, and coordination. And beyond resources, there are things to consider like staffing, clearly defined job descriptions and roles, safety protocols, specialized training, but also mission creep. I believe nothing comes easy, and I urge the decision makers to be thoughtful and methodical, because BPS students should be afforded the presumption of childhood that they deserve to both improve the quality of safety and the quality of their educational experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Hani Murad.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, good evening.
Good evening, Chairwoman Robinson, members of the school committee. Thank you for taking the time to hear from us, the school psychologist, about our experience. My name is Hani Murad. I am a school psychologist and I reside in Newton, Massachusetts. And I work at the Margarita Muniz Academy as well as Behavioral Health Services district-wide. I'm testifying tonight on behalf of my school psychologist colleagues. Since the beginning of the school year, we as a school psychologist were moved from the Behavioral Health Services Department budget to individual school based budget. Because each of us serves in many capacities and serves in many different schools, numerous problems related to errors in pay, sick leave, personal leave, and health insurance were created. Consequently, some of us school psychologists could not pay their mortgages or needed to delay medical procedures. Until today, most of our pay stubs show errors. For example, under the item of pay rate, there continues to reflect only one portion of our assignment because the human capital system is not equipped to handle multiple assignments. This resulted in many issues, including inability to be able for us to verify if our pay or our check is correctly paid. And there also has been major negative ramifications for staff members who wants to apply for loans and mortgages. The move to a school-based budget also hinders our flexibility to respond to demands the district-wide, including compliance issues, crisis and emergency response, and helping other colleagues who are overwhelmed by the number of tasks they are required to do. We request your kind assistance in resolving these issues, but most of all, we are requesting you to consider reversing the decision by keeping the budgets designated for school psychologists to be under Behavioral Health Services Department. Thank you for your attention and good evening.
Thank you. Chair Robinson, that concludes our speakers for general public comment.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan, and thank you to those of you who spoke this evening and shared your perspectives. Your testimony is very important to us. Our first action item this evening is grants for approval totaling $762,300. I'll now open it up to the committee for final questions and comments. If there are none, I'll now entertain a motion to approve the grants as presented. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion or objection to the motion? Ms. Sullivan, will you please call the roll?
Dr. Alkins,
Yes.
Mr. Cadet Hernandez,
Yeah.
Ms. Lopera, Ms. Polanco Garcia, Mr. Tran,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson.
Yes.
The grants are approved unanimously.
Thank you. Our next action items are 3 related votes. 2 memoranda of agreement between the Boston School Committee and the United Steelworkers, Local 2936, better known as our bus monitors, and in fiscal year 23 supplemental appropriation request to the Boston City Council to support the cost of these agreements. You will recall that Labor Relations Director Jeremiah Hassan presented these proposals to the committee at our January 11th meeting. I will now invite the superintendent to offer any final comments.
Thank you, Chair. Just that we really appreciate all of these units, the hard work that they do. We feel that this was an opportunity to be able to show that in these contracts. And we would urge the committee to vote to support the further supplementation of dollars. So thank you.
Thank you. I'll now open it up to the committee for final questions or comments. Mr. Cardet Hernandez.
I think in previous weeks, my colleague, Dr. Alkins, has sort of alluded to this too, but I'm gonna vote yes tonight because of the agreement and where the union has landed, but I think I carry a serious fear that the wages are not, particularly for our bus monitors, are not competitive enough to truly address the staffing crisis. And so, I'm moving forward, but I'm moving forward with real fear that we're not doing enough to really put students first, particularly students with disabilities who really need this support as they transition between home and school.
Thank you. Are there any other comments before we move forward? Thank you. The committee will take 3 separate votes, one on each agreement and one on the supplemental appropriation request. There's nothing further. I'll now entertain a motion to approve the memorandum of agreement between the Boston School Committee and the United Steelworkers, Local 2936, effective July 1, 2020 through June 30, 2022, as presented. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion or objection to the motion? Ms. Sullivan, will you please call the roll?
Dr. Alkins,
Yes.
Mr. Cadet Hernandez,
Yes.
Ms. Lupera, Ms. Polanco Garcia, Mr. Tran,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Mr. O'Neill? You're muted.
I know, sorry, it was not working, the unmute button. Yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Robinson.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion is approved unanimously.
Thank you. I'll now entertain a motion to approve the memorandum of agreement between the Boston School Committee and the United Steelworkers Local 2936 bus monitors, effective July 1, 2022 through June 30th, 2025, as presented. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion or objection to the motion? Ms. Sullivan, will you please call the roll?
Dr. Alkins,
Yes.
Mr. Cadet Hernandez,
Yes.
Ms. Lupera, Ms. Polanco Garcia, Mr. Tran,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson.
Yes.
The motion is approved unanimously.
Thank you. Our final action item this evening is a fiscal year 23 supplemental appropriation request in the amount of $1,079,770 to support memorandum of agreement for the successor collective bargaining agreement between the Boston School Committee and the United Steelworkers Local 2936 presented. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion or objection to the motion? Ms. Sullivan, will you please call the roll?
Dr. Alkins,
Yes.
Mr. Cadet Hernandez,
Yes.
Ms. Lopera, Ms. Polanco Garcia, Mr. Tran,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson.
Yes.
The motion is approved unanimously.
Thank you, and thank you to all of those who worked hard to make this possible. Tonight, we will hear from the Council of Great City Schools regarding their report and recommendations for safety services here in Boston. Dr. Ray Hart, Executive Director of the Council, will present the report along with Willie Burrows, the Council's Director of Management Services. Members will then have an opportunity to ask any questions. Before we hear from the Council, I wanted to share that, as has been past practice, portions of the safety report are confidential and will be discussed in executive session at a future meeting. Some of the report's content related to its findings and recommendations on the topic of emergency management, if disclosed publicly, could compromise the safety of our staff and students. Safety is the district's #1 priority, and we do not want to share any information that could potentially jeopardize the safety of our students and staff. With that being said, tonight's presentation will focus on safety services, and the school committee will meet at a later date in executive session to discuss the other findings and recommendations. I want to ask Superintendent if there are any comments she would like to make before the presentation. And I'd like to remind everyone to speak at a slower pace to assist our interpreters. Thank you, Superintendent.
Great, thank you, Chair. So first, thank you to the Council of Great City Schools for their continued partnership, expertise. This is the third report we will have received from them. This report is going to help us as we continue to improve our efforts to ensure the safety of all students and staff. There's nothing more important, as the chair said, than the safety of the BPS community. It's my priority. It's the district's #1 priority. We're committed to doing everything we can to learn from the report to create a safe learning environment for our students. A quick note on the scope of the report. With DESE's support per the SIP, per our systemic improvement plan, the council was commissioned to provide a high-level management view of the district's student and staff safety operations. Specifically, the district asked the council to assess student and safety and staff safety protocols at schools and to make recommendations to ensure safe learning environments across the district, including an evaluation of coordination and communication between BPS and the Boston Police Department. It does not discuss in detail strategies such as restorative justice, increasing and supporting school counselors, or wraparound supports, all of which are critical to ensuring the BPS community's holistic safety and our approach to student safety. We look forward to implementing many of their recommendations in this area while we continue to pursue a holistic approach to student well-being, which includes measures like bullying prevention programming, mental health awareness initiatives, restorative justice circles, and peer-to-peer mediation. With that in mind, this report also focuses on emergency management. This includes policies and procedures to prevent and manage threats to safety and updating and maintaining the security of our buildings. And safety services, which includes our relationship with BPD, additional policies to maintain the safety of students and staff, and and staffing, retaining, and developing our safety services team. A cross-functional group of the district level has already met multiple times on this, including with me. I apologize, including with me to review the report in detail and planning for next steps. Everyone has a role to play. We look forward to continuing to work with partners in communities across the city to ensure everyone is safe. As we move forward with this work, and as we've said with other reports from the council, stakeholder and community engagement and partnerships will be critical. We look forward to engaging with our community, city, state, and in some cases, national partners on these very important issues. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to, excuse me, Director Ray Hart from the Council of Great City Schools for their report.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Skipper. It's a pleasure to be back with you again. Madam Chair, Chair Robinson, thank you, and members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to share. As was shared earlier, we've identified in the safety and security review several items we are sharing with you tonight. What we are able to share publicly. There are some others that we want to make sure that we don't want to become public, given the sensitive nature of the information. So I'll share that with you. We look forward to taking any questions that you might have at the end of the presentation. And again, I am thankful. Again, you should be seeing my screen that says Boston Public Schools Safety and Security. Again, I am thankful to Willie Burroughs and the team that came to conduct the review of this particular report. They were a number of officers from around the country, those who in some cases are officers, in other cases are safety and security personnel from the Atlanta Public Schools, the Buffalo Public School District, and others. And so I want to thank them for their participation as well. And given that, we'll give a brief overview as we have in the past. We'll talk briefly about some of the operational findings that we found, and then recommendations related to those. We'll open up the floor then to questions and answers. So some of the context that we observed that is in the report are most importantly the systemic improvement plan that was jointly signed by the mayor of Boston and representatives from BPS, as well as DESE had some involvement in that as well, but it really outlined a set of initiatives. And we recommend in the report really following through on some of the things that were identified in that systemic improvement plan and continuing to support that work. In addition to that, of note was the governor of Massachusetts signing into law an act relative to justice, equity, and accountability and law enforcement in the Commonwealth. That was in December 31st, 2020. In your report, we note a number of ways that has impacted your ability to hire and bring in and also support sworn officers in the district, and what that has meant for the support system that is in place. You've since transitioned to a new set of supports for your schools, which we outlined in the report as well, some of which will be mentioned here as part of operations. But we also discuss how that act in particular has resulted in a loss of police powers for those who are licensed under BPD and work in the school district. And we'll talk more about that in a few moments. So some key findings and commendations, the first of which is that the team heard that Succeed Boston, your bullying prevention program, as well as other programs in the district around restorative justice. We have actually come to learn, we don't specifically address these in the report as Superintendent Skipper shared, but we've come to learn from looking at them, having others around the country review the structure of them, that they're quite strong. And so the members of the team wanted to make sure that they gave commendations to the district around some of those support systems that are in place. The Chief of Safety Services was heavily engaged, not only with the community, but also the broader outside of BPS community as well. And she worked very closely with us as we went through the process, and we were appreciative of her support. Safety specialists appear to be dedicated to the work. Those safety specialists are the new set of employees that you have hired to support your schools that are a transition given the changes that the law stipulated. And they seem to be serving your school students in positive ways, including attending court proceedings, advocating on behalf of your students when necessary, and providing overall supports. Finally, the BPD commissioner expressed that he had a desire to, and I apologize, but he expressed for the noise in the background, but he expressed that he had a desire to work closely with the school district. He expressed a desire to work closely with the school district and beginning to in their interaction with students, and a commitment overall to really supporting the district and its needs. And we'll talk more about that in terms of what the district needs to do with Boston Police Department shortly in our recommendations. Moving on, we'll talk about operations and some of our findings, and then we'll provide recommendations. So the first is that the time to select and onboard candidates, particularly for security positions, is really providing an opportunity for those individuals to find opportunities in other places. And so we've got some recommendations around how to shore that process up, but just the hiring and onboarding process is taking a considerable amount of time. Campus staff are also having to spend considerably more time addressing school safety concerns, which is taking away from the time in the classroom. And we'll address that as well, but also it relates to the school safety specialist that we talked about earlier. The police reform bill has caused some confusion around the roles and responsibilities between the Boston Police Department and the Boston Public Schools. And what I mean by that is that we observed, or the team heard, a number of circumstances where schools were unsure of when to call the Boston Police Department versus when an issue was a BPS issue. And there's some other role confusion that's occurring about how to process and handle student supports as a part of the process. And then finally, there was not enough collaboration between IT, facilities, as well as safety and security. And so one of the things that we will recommend shortly is just additional collaboration between IT, facilities, safety, and security to ensure that that those three departments are working hand in hand to make sure that the technology needs of the schools are being met. And so some of our recommendations are, first and foremost, we encourage the superintendent and the Boston Police Department to work collaboratively on developing an MOU or an intergovernmental agreement that will help establish some of the protocols for understanding the opportunities for police to build positive relationships, how the Boston Police Department will interact with Boston Public Schools, and then designing a process for sharing information. This process for sharing information is not about sharing information relative to individual students' needs. It's more an understanding of jointly understanding of what is going on broadly in the community, so that both the school district and the police department have a general understanding, but it's not about sharing specific information about individuals. Creating a focus group of appropriate stakeholders and administrators to consider if BPS should form an internal sworn police department. Several of our districts have recently transitioned to their own internal police departments. It is not necessarily something that is appropriate for Boston Public Schools. It is not something that we are recommending you absolutely do. What we're recommending is that you have a conversation about what that means. So I want to be clear that this is not a recommendation saying that Boston should in fact do this. Several of our districts, again, have done it recently, and we can provide connections to those districts. For example, one of the members of the team was from the Atlanta Public Schools, and Atlanta Public Schools has recently started their own internal sworn police department. We can share the pros and cons of what that means if Boston is interested. But again, this is just a recommendation to have a conversation about what that might look like, not to actually, not that recommendation to actually do it. Second, require BPS security services to be more involved in the hiring process to help reduce the time it takes to select and onboard your candidates. And so again, this is a recommendation for human resources, human capital, to make sure that they're working closely with security services as they hire those individuals into the district, to ensure that, again, just the onboarding process, understanding where individuals are in the hiring process is all clear, laid out, and they can maintain communications with prospective candidates. Last is mandate that law enforcement records be identified by FERPA, as identified by FERPA, reside under the management and supervision of safety services. Again, so a recommendation on our part. I know that there are FERPA requirements. The safety services staff will also have to adhere to any expectations that your general counsel might establish related to FERPA. But again, it will help them understand, maintain access over the records that really relate to the support services that they're providing in the district. Next is really acquire an anonymous reporting system or hotline software product to encourage the reporting of inappropriate or anticipated dangerous behaviors. On this particular recommendation, it's really an anonymous hotline for both students, staff, families, parents to report information to the district so that the district can be made aware anonymously of things that might be going on. There are other districts that have similar programs in place. For example, in Clark County Public Schools, there is, and it's actually on their website, there is a safe voice protocol or kind of process in place. As an example, where students, staff can call and anonymously provide information to the district that will help them get ahead of any potential safety and security issues that might occur. Address low morale issues in safety services department by encouraging team building, skip level meetings, and professional development opportunities. And the council will take a role in providing support to the district on where there might be around the country opportunities to provide professional learning options, professional development options for safety and security staff who are not sworn police officers, et cetera. So we'll be happy to do that. Skip level meetings is really just providing one-on-one supports for those that might not be direct reports to you, but might directly report to those who are under you, just helping to develop a better understanding of their needs, a better understanding of the supports that they might need to improve, as we shared, so morale. Some of this also has to do with the change in the law. Some of your safety and security officers that you currently have in place were formerly sworn officers, and because of the change in the law that the governor signed, they're now not. So just an understanding, an overall understanding of what that change in the law has meant for their departments, what that has meant for their work, and what that's meant for the organization overall are recommendations that we have just in terms of understanding what that means and putting in new policies and procedures to support that work. And then finally, prioritize roles and responsibilities in all department units to ensure that personnel focus on school-based safety and policing practices can be supported. What we're really referring to here is making sure that they can maintain their focus on the safety and security roles in the district. Also ensuring that those individuals in the school are championing the support work of your safety and security personnel. And then finally, this is human resources specific. I gave one example a little earlier of a recommendation for human resources, but this one is slightly different. This is a broader overview, and that is monitor turnover rates and establish exit interview protocols to ensure that those who separate from BPS, that you're understanding what those causes are, you're understanding what the challenges were for those individuals, and you're making sure that you put in place opportunities across departments to change policy, to provide additional supports where necessary to support your personnel. Second, revisit, rewrite, update, and distribute job descriptions that reflect current roles and responsibilities. So again, that's an ongoing process, and it's something that from a human capital perspective, you should be doing on a regular basis. And then last, invite communications and human resources to plan and staff ongoing recruitment opportunities and leverage communication and social media together to fulfill current vacancies. So these are some of the things that you'll have to do, not just for safety and security, but for human capital overall. But I would encourage you specifically as you're communicating your needs around hiring staff, et cetera, that are focused on what those communications look like specifically for safety and security, be run through both the communications office, the safety and security office, as well as human resources. With that, we'll be happy to take any questions that you have. And Willie Burrows has joined me on the meeting, and so we'll be happy to address any questions that you might have about what we've shared.
Thank you so much for that report, Dr. Hart. I want to turn it back to the superintendent. If you want to give any comments before we move into general comments and questions from the committee.
Thank you, Chair. And so thank you, Dr. Hart. Good to see you again today. You know, again, I think the recommendations resonated with us, both the process ones as well as output. Some of this we've begun, and I think the recommendations are giving us a pointer into the direction we should lean. We're very eager to be able to see what other districts have worked toward, to be able to see what might be a fit, you know, here for us within BPS and how we might learn from that. I know that our Deputy Soup for Operations, Sam DePina, has some specific comments. This is obviously security and safety is within the ops division. And I know that he would like to share some thinking on this as well. So I'll turn the floor to him for a bit.
Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Skipper. I also want to again thank Dr. Hart, Mr. Burrows, and the Council of Great City Schools team for this report. The district has a lot of work underway in this area, and we know we have a lot of work ahead of us. We see the work ahead of us as falling into two broad categories. First is formalizing and refining work that is already underway. For example, the district has a safety committee that we established, which is a cross-functional team made up of representatives from the Operations Division, Office of Safety Services, Facilities Management, our Technology Department, and the Schools Division. This committee is in the process of synthesizing feedback from school leaders to inform the implementation plans, recommendations to up-to-date security at our schools. We have refined and held multiple updated trainings on our communication protocols for responding to incidents. Over the last few weeks, we began a strategic planning process for our Office of Human Capital which we will be conducting in collaboration with the staff in the department, as well as gaining industry expertise from local large businesses, national large businesses, with support of our partnership office and others. We will be engaged in that process, and we'll be learning to bring some of those best practices to the Office of Human Capital. We have launched strategic planning process with the Office of Safety Services as well to see how we can embed these recommendations into our work within that department. We're working with the Office of Human Capital to ensure that we're recruiting and retaining highly qualified, diverse workforce. We currently have the safety specialist positions posted and are looking closely at our onboarding process for these team members and making refinements where needed. I want to also thank Chief Copley for her leadership. And under her leadership, the Safety Services team has fostered partnerships with various community-based agencies such as Big Sisters, which provide safety specialists an opportunity to mentor students and engage the community in other meaningful ways. We routinely engage in national conversation around best practices by attending conferences and participating in forums hosted by the Council of Gray City Schools and bringing some of those learnings back into the district and our team. We look forward to being connected to other districts as we take steps to implement the recommendations from this report and engage in deeper conversations about the recommendations. The second category that we grouped the recommendations in is forming new partnerships or re-engaging partners across the city to ensure that our children and youth and staff are safe. I just want to underscore that we can't do this work alone, and we recognize that. We are ongoing conversations with Boston Police Department regarding an updated MOU. We just had a conversation as early as today about it and just getting an update. So I want to thank our BPD partners and continuing those conversations. We meet regularly with city partners and agencies to ensure that we are working collaboratively and effectively as we deploy supports as part of a citywide response to incidents and refine specific resources available to our most vulnerable families. I also want to thank Mayor Wu for her leadership, as she just yesterday announced the creation of the Office of Youth Engagement and Advancement that will support the development, engagement, and empowerment of the city's young people. BPS staff look forward to working in close collaboration with this team. In all of this work going forward, we are committed to using the racial equity planning tool. So that will be underscored and used throughout and really raised as a high need as we go forward, and all the work will be modeled under those categories in the racial equity planning tool. Again, we greatly appreciate the council's partnership. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, and I'll turn it over to you, Madam Chair, and we'll take any questions you may have.
Thank you. We'll start with Dr. Alkins.
Thank you, and thank you for the report. I think similar to last week's report, I think much of the recommendations are in line with the thinking. I think it's also a bit, we've known what we've have to do on this front. And so I think in some ways it's good to see this as affirming of our thinking on it. So I have a few questions and more of a comment, and for questions for different folks. So for Dr. Hart, one is, do you think that we should be conducting, or did you find in your investigation that we are conducting ongoing surveys that are probing, I would think, students and staff to understand their perceptions of safety as we're transitioning from a more exclusive BPD involvement to working with our safety specialists? And is that actually working in terms of making our students safer? For our superintendent, I'm actually very curious, just passing your 100-day mark, sort of what's your perception of the BPD BPS relationship, and where do you see that going in the future? And or Mr. DePina, you had mentioned sort of your two categories, the first being a formal relationship between many offices within BPS. What I didn't necessarily hear in that list of offices was community representation. Maybe I might have missed that. So just ensuring that perhaps there is representation as part of those groups of bodies that are meeting to ensure that there's at least some understanding and input with regard to the security updates that we plan to instill within the district. And then my last comment is sort of embedded in this. We heard about sort of the delays in the onboarding process, and this sort of harkens back to what we've heard in our public comment about human capital. And so I think my question there is, what support does the Office of Human Capital need from us? Because it seems that, there's a lot of questions on abilities and just what's going on there. And I'm not asking to throw anyone under the bus, but I'm just asking from a place of wanting to be supportive as a school committee member. I'll stop there.
So I can jump in on to answer the first one. So I definitely think that one of the things picked up in the report was accurate in my experience coming in, which was that there was confusion around BPD, if BPD should come into buildings or not, what the relationship was, whether from school leaders' side, whether they should have BPD, whether they should call 911. We worked very hard in the first couple of months to develop a comms cascade or a critical incidents communications plan that most large districts will have. And that is sort of, when do you invoke BPD and when do you call 911? Under what circumstances does the school safety specialist unit handle the situation, and what is purely school-based types of issues? And held multiple, at this point, we've held multiple calls with leaders, conversations, talked through that. I know that Sam has worked hard on the operations side with the ops leaders, the school soups. And I do think that there's just far more clarity around this. I also think that the commissioner has also done a great deal with BPD to be able to clarify that as well. Because we need to be able to rely that when there is truly a health and safety emergency, something that's falling underneath our 911 category, such as a missing child, that we don't hesitate to call and to have BPD be able to come in and gain access to the school. So I do think that's an accurate reporting, from the council's observations and dialogue. I do think we have been working hard on this piece, and the commission and I will continue to make sure that we provide clarity for the field and for the force, in these particular areas. In terms of the HC piece, what I will say is that I'm not going to, I want to really kind of stay focused in this piece, of the work tonight, but I do think human capital has been in sort of a unique situation with just a tremendous volume of jobs that through ESSER dollars over the last 2 years has just ballooned the system. And so it's been a combination, I think, of that. There's been a lot, from the stipend standpoint, tremendous amount of work that is supported on ESSER dollars. And so the volume of that with the staffing that was there, I think was not the right match. I think additionally, as we've talked about with the systems, one of the things that Deputy DePina is looking at is this issue of efficiency of the systems, outdated pieces of the systems. And so there's going to be some strong recommendations around what we can do to help support HC going forward, so that it can be the enterprise that we need it to be for BPS. Some of the issues that were brought up around particular job categories and changes that made it more difficult with the payroll are accurate. Those were made through the budget process last year, and the process of catching those up has taken a long time within the system to have happen. At day's end, one of the most important things we do is pay people and pay people accurately. And so this is an area that we have been and are meeting on regularly to determine what is needed. But I also think this will be an area that we'll have further conversations with the Council of Great City Schools to glean, their thinking and point us in the direction relative to large scale human capital systems. In the case of the safety specialists, we've made a very concentrated effort on these particular positions to give priority so that Chief Coakley can have them posted. And then when they're screened, to make sure that we're onboarding in a timely manner. And so we will continue to do that, especially with the recommendation from council. We will continue to make that a priority area as we move through the rest of the school year and try to get the positions to full capacity.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And for my other question, I'm sorry, Dr. DePina, I did make a mistake earlier, so I want to rectify that too.
No, no worries. And then just to reiterate that when we use the racial equity planning tool, we'll definitely be working with the Office of Family and Community Engagement to help us structure how that would look and what that would look like. The deputy positions give us that flexibility to make sure there's through lines and all the work.
And just to answer your question about the perceptions of safety among students and staff, again, we brought in experts we actually did school visits as part of the process. We went around, took a look at what's actually happening on the ground. And so in that process, we allowed our experts to observe, again, what are some of the needs, what are some of the things that you need to make sure you show up from a safety perspective. Yes, the perceptions are important to us, but again, we're looking at what do we actually see on the ground in our overall review.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Cardet Hernandez.
Thank you so much for the report. I have a few questions as well. I'll do mine one at a time, just so I think sometimes that makes it easier. I guess I'm curious, and I know there's a second part that we will be briefed on in executive session, but I think I'm walking away from this, I guess, with a little bit of confusion around what we're looking to solve. Like, what is the problem that we are trying to address? And maybe that's a good place for us to start. Like, I'm looking at the language around the point of the audit, right? It's like, commission an independent student and staff safety audit to assess safety protocols at schools and make recommendations to ensure safe learning environments for all students across the district, including an evaluation of coordination and communication between BPS and BPD. I guess in this first phase, like, what are we trying to solve for? Because like in some moments, it's like, maybe we should create a separate internal police department at BPS or like start a conversation about that. And then other times it's like more granular sort of protocol driven pieces. So sort of just zooming out, what's our why and sort of what's our what?
So, I mean, I can, so the SIP language, I think I interpret in kind of a couple different ways. High level, are there high level systems that might be missing that would in general shore up safety and security of the system? And then at a granular level, where those might exist already, are they being used properly with fidelity? Are there areas that need to be strengthened with them? Should they be discarded? Should they be expanded? And so I think it's at a high level and a protocol level, to your point. But I think the scope is broad, right? Which is sort of what you're saying too. And I think, in the council's recommendations, I think you see the high level, which is kind of this the recommendation of having more discussion and a focus group to see whether or not an internal police force is a potential solution, down to granularity around, say, metal detectors, ensuring we're using best practice that other large scale districts are using. So it's high and it's low. And Dr. Hart, I don't know if there's anything further.
No, I think that's absolutely it. I think in addition to that, there's just the converse. What we're recommending here is the conversations, but there are also some specific things in terms of the why that we generated as well. Some of those specifics, obviously, some are broader, and we've shared those here. Some are more specific, which we'll share with you kind of one-on-one.
Great. I guess just follow-up question here, and maybe this is where I'm feeling lost. There are solutions to address what? So like with transportation, we had a really clear understanding around data that we knew was concerning and problematic. And so like we had very clear through line around like what outcome failures we needed systems to better address. The same is true for special education. Like we knew where the failures were. And so we were trying to address that output. And here I'm getting a really important and comprehensive list of things to consider and do without a clear understanding of this, what we consider to be the state of the problem.
Yeah. So this is so I understand your point better now. So this actually the Civ language predates me. I don't, if Monica Hogan is on, she might have an insight because I believe this language came from DESE. And so she might have some insight as to if there were specifics that led to that kind of two-prong piece. Monica, are you on?
I am here. I would actually defer to Dr. Eccleston on this question through the development of the SIP if he has any context to add.
Dr. Eccleston?
He's not here.
Okay.
Briefly, if
Sam, you?
Yeah, briefly if I can. My understanding of the context was just to make sure that we take a close look at our operational work around safety services and what we do to keep students safe overall. It was concerning for them to give feedback that, you know, maybe we weren't taking the best safety approaches and implementing the best safety practices across the district. So they wanted us to just pause, take a closer look and see what, if anything, we can do better based on our work around bullying, based on our work around making sure we address the problem resolution complaints that they were fielding on their side, and really wanted to make sure that we took a closer look at our practices around safety and security. So that's what prompted it. And I think, you know, we did a good job at just pausing, making sure we had all the people that were involved in our safety service work connect with the Council of Great City Schools team in order to paint that picture so we can just talk about what we do. And the council was great at giving us some feedback and suggestions on how we can improve.
I think the other thing, just to add some additional context, is it's not unusual in this particular case for our districts to say, listen, we're in a continuous improvement mode. It's not that we're going to identify anything specific that we want to address, but we want to continuously improve and always take a look at what we're doing to make sure that there aren't ways that we can do it better. We've done safety and security reviews most recently in Houston Independent School District for much the same reason. They have a very strong safety and security team, officers, et cetera, but just wanted to know where are those places where we can improve or get better. Similarly, I think this was an opportunity just to say, here's what we observe, here's what we see, but here's opportunities for improvement. So it's not targeting one thing in particular, but really more understanding where are we now and how can we get better.
I hear you, and I think I can't see the timer, so I assume I'm out of time.
Yeah.
This only feels different than possibly what occurred in Houston because it was under an agreement with the state. And so it wasn't just like we're in continuous improvement and it's working. There was something different here, which was like there's a system failure that was being identified by the state that they wanted us to have an analysis over. And I think in my head at that time, some of the context was Mission Hill and what we were seeing happening on a localized school level that led to unsafe experiences for kids. And, you know, I'm just curious. I think it's important. I think it'll be important for us when we come back to really talk more thoroughly about which recommendations we will take as a system, to also talk about how we understand the state of the problem. And like, for me, it's always about kids and staff and families. Like, how do we make them safer but it has to be rooted in some sort of data or that we're concerned about. And for the other two reports, we've been very clear on what data we universally, I think, agreed on was concerning. And for this one, I'm just not seeing it. And so it's hard to know, without shooting towards an outcome, it's hard to know what the priority is.
Well, through you, Chair, we will talk with both the state and Dr. Eccleston to see in the original SIP what was the if there were particular measures that we needed to look at. I've not seen them. I've not seen them in print anywhere, but it's probably historical, oral language.
Okay,
Thank you.
yeah. Mr. Tron?
Oh, thank you. I know my time is pretty limited to about 5 minutes, so I'll lay out some of my more important questions in my mind. Going through the presentation, and I do need some just clarification, as a matter of fact. First of all, in the key findings portion, you found that the police department or the police commissioner has a desire to be part of the school safety, and he has stated a commitment to handle issues through diversion instead of prosecution. The question I have, a clarifying question, as a matter of fact. Diversion here means what? Is it included restorative justice type of procedures? That's one. In the key finding, I'm sorry, hold on. God. Okay, in the key finding, you mentioned that not enough collaboration between IT and facilities on technology needs. Does that include a concern regarding the public records, the law enforcement records? As a matter of fact, right now, the recommendation, part of the recommendation was that the law enforcement records should reside under the management and supervision of the of safety services. So, at the moment, presently, where are those records reside? Are they resided in accordance with FERPA protection? That's my second question. Just to throw out most of the all the questions so that you don't have to deal with it through a different thing. The confusion between the state newly revised safety law and FERPA. I gather that members of the school safety services are pretty much trained or are required to be trained and provided the training and be provided with the training, the nooks and crannies of those two. And so that they are performing their duties in line with, with our rules and procedure, as opposed to the requirements of, in connection, not as opposed to, but in connection with the FERPA, as well as the other police law, the state police law. So those are the kind of questions that, just basically I need clarification. The last one is, I think you recommend some sort of focus group. Right now, don't we have, within the administration, don't we have some sort of a subcommittee on public safety? If that is already in place, rather than putting together a focus group, maybe we should strengthen that committee with stakeholders, or with someone with expertise in public safety and laws and legal procedures regarding these kind of issues. Thank you.
So through you, Chair. So Committee Member Tran, I'm going to actually ask our legal advisor, Lisa Mackey, to come on. The questions you had are very good ones about the differential of FERPA, where the records reside, and there was a historical change that happened when the state law changed, and we dismantled school police and replaced it with school safety. And what is in that, and at the core of that, is who can view and actually write records that would either be part of the student record or not be part of the student record. And so Attorney Mackey, would you mind coming on and just providing committee with a bit of historical on this?
Sure thing. Good evening, Chair and Superintendent, members of the school committee. Lisa Mackey, legal advisor for the Boston Public Schools. With respect to the effect of the police reform law on the ability to write reports for the school safety service specialists prior to the effect of the the police reform law in July of 2021, school resource or school police, Boston Public School Police, could write incident reports through the BPD 1-1 system. Once that law took effect, they lost their special police powers and no longer had the ability to create those 1-1s. Our current school committee policy on writing school safety reports dictates what the safety service specialists can actually write school. They're called SSR1 reports about. And so that's kind of the where we are in terms of the documentation and the record keeping of the school safety service specialists. The records that are maintained by safety service specialists are, law enforcement records for purposes of FERPA. But again, the safety service specialists are what they can write about in terms of incidents at school is governed by the school committee policy.
And just to quickly answer your question about the Boston Police Commissioner. He has expressed a willingness to have a conversation, but it's one of the reasons that we recommend Boston Public Schools as well as the BPD. Our recommendation is to sit down and talk through what a memorandum of understanding or what an intergovernmental agreement looks like in terms of expressly how supports for students between BPD and BPS, what it looks like, what it entails, et cetera. So the expression is not, again, a formal agreement between BPS and BPD, and we're recommending that you establish a formal agreement there. Secondly, you asked about facilities and technology integration. Again, that is more the integration of systems, making sure that across those divisions, there is an integration of systems rather than having uniquely standalone systems across departments. And so it's making sure that what's purchased, the systems that are integrated into the schools are all seamlessly integrated across those divisions. So I hope that answers your question.
Member Tran, last part of your question was around the focus groups. We do have multiple focus groups that we do engage with, depending on the topic. We want to make sure we have really a wide variety of voice in whatever process we engage in outcomes we're looking for. So for example, we do have the Community Equity Roundtable. That would be one focus group, but at times we'll have a smaller focus group with just students, or maybe just school leaders, or maybe just teachers, or maybe just central office staff. So depending on the topic and how deep we want to give feedback, we'll hold multiple focus groups.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tran. Mr. Mehta.
More on what exactly Mr. Tran was saying. Not what exactly Mr. Tran was saying. More on how BPD should be involved. Or I just to make it clear, I'm not sure if this is should BPD be more I'm trying to figure out the right words. Should BPD be more are you guys recommending that BPD be more involved in like the safety procedures, or not, or are you just saying they should be written more clearly? Because I'm and if you're okay, I'll just ask that right now. Lots of other things that I have in my head that hopefully can eventually come out in the right words, but I'm just gonna stop for right now.
So I think, thank you for that question. I think it's important that what we're suggesting is, again, develop a formal relationship for what the interaction between BPS and BPD looks like through, again, the memorandum of understanding or the intergovernmental agreement. We're not defining one way or the other what that actually looks like. But what we're suggesting is, again, as we shared in some of the findings, there's some confusion about what those roles are, when there should be interaction there. And so what we're suggesting is formalize that so that there's public and general understanding about what that looks like.
And also another question is, how do you exactly do that without, because whenever police are involved, there is a mistrust in the community around police, as we all know. So what do we do in that scenario to make it so that there is less of one in these situations, in that when they are called over, it is handled properly instead of, I don't know, you know what? Okay. I don't know what I'm saying, man. Never mind.
Okay.
You're fine, man.
Yeah,
You got
okay,
it.
you're all right.
Yeah. Yeah, Diego, I think what you're saying about what should be expected if BPD is called, I think that is what Dr. Hart's suggesting the MOU is for. So the MOU is like an agreement between BPS and BPD that says, if these circumstances happen and you're called, this is what happens, right? And so everybody is on the same page about that. And so I think that's what you're asking. So I think the MOU is the document that we don't have it that way right now that would help to clarify that.
And Diego, once that's complete, we'll make sure we work with you all and BSAC and come up with a plan on how we educate not only BSAC, but all students and all staff and the city at large about what that looks like and means. So once it's done, we'll engage in the process and how we can share that more broadly.
Mr. O'Neill?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Dr. Hart and Mr. Burrows, for your presentation. Again, tonight, when I think of the intersection of your three presentations about special ed, about transportation, about safety, this is all about putting our students in the best position to learn, right? And our teachers in the best position to teach. You know, we could have added one on food service and other issues. Everything is around putting our positions and our families in the best position to learn. And, you know, the issue of school safety can be very fraught, as it can be a conversation about transportation when we, you know, when there are issues in our school buildings or outside our school buildings, it receives a lot of attention, and it can certainly give the perception that our schools are challenging places. And a lot of parents will also take umbrage at that, about how the media talks about it. And I agree that I think data is critical, and as we talked about in transportation and special ed, focusing on data as a starting point there does not seem as strong a conversation here. What did really jump out to me big time, and like Dr. Elkins, I am tying it with presentations during a public comment when I hear about that the hiring takes too long and that the Office of Student Safety isn't as involved, and maybe some technology issues. And I think about that, and I think about you know, any challenges in hiring, particularly in today's environment, and issues paying our employees, which are just breathtaking to even hear about. I step back and say, is there really a tech debt here, a technology debt across our district? And, you know, superintendent, that's going to be an answer for a different day to have our technology folks say, but have we been pushing I don't even know the answer to this. Have we pushed the can down the road on systems updates that now get to a point where we can't figure out how to pay people? We have slowdowns in hiring and having the right departments involved in making hiring decisions in an environment where we do have to move fast to get people involved. And so one is the technology decisions that we should be making here and investments we should be making, particularly during a time of ESSER funding availability that allows our human capital area to be in a position to move rapidly, which clearly they're not in right now. So Superintendent, I asked you that question before I move to some safety questions for Dr. Hart.
So through you, Chair. So I think the long and the short answer is yes. I think it's twofold, right? I think one, that technology hasn't, as a department, hasn't necessarily been at the table in the ways that it should be invited to help be part of the solution, right? And I think that's kind of one. And so, and then if you're not thinking about how technology can help to make things more efficient or connect and support, because they're not at the table, then that is a missed opportunity. And then I think to the second part of that, there's definitely areas where we need to look to more enterprise our technology in a way, you know, much like a big business does, to be able to handle the volume. Because that's what we have in a large district that's very different than a small district. We have volume. So when you have to make a change to 2,000 employees, that's a volume, and you have to have the system in place, the human process, but you also have to have a technology solution that's going to enable that to happen as quickly as possible. So I think it's a number of things that we have to look at, Committee Member O'Neill, in this particular area, both human practice as well as the systems piece, the technology and the systems piece.
Well, we're in budget planning season right now, right? And we do have ESSER funds available. So I hope that becomes part of the budget presentation that you're making. I'd love to see an investment in technology. There are human resource systems out there right? Well, plenty of people that are dealing with more people that we are, that could just alleviate a lot of these. Dr. Hart, I want to go back to some of your recommendations, and I appreciate the sensitivity of the language that you used around a recommendation that we have a conversation in our city about how we approach policing within our district. We used to have school resource officers, we used to have school police, then we had school resource officers. Now, due to the changes in the laws in the Commonwealth, we moved to the safety specialists. I appreciate your recommendation, which I hope people really noticed the distinction that you were talking about, which was you encourage us to have a conversation about what's the solution that's right for Boston and include community in doing that. And I believe you said, were you saying that Atlanta went through this conversation, and did they do a similar approach where they put together a task force? What type of folks were included in that? How was the community voice heard? How was parent and student voice heard? Do you think the outcome has become a best practice? Help me out a little bit more on that, because that's a very, very fraught conversation to have. And so
it is a, I appreciate the question, it is a very fraught conversation to have. They went through an extensive process for making that determination. I can put you in touch with them and they can lay out all the details of what they went through, how they did it. What I can tell you is actually the benefit that it is meant to the district. In the district, they actually have social emotional learning. They actually have a unit in the district that handles social emotional learning for all of the schools. They have social emotional learning specialists for their elementary, middle, and high schools. Those specialists actually work hand in hand with the officers in the district, and the officers actually provide across all of the schools social emotional training for students, for teachers, for staff. They're also at the forefront of providing a lot of ongoing supports for students in the district. And they've also been able to dictate for those officers specific training on what it means to be an officer in a school building, what it means to provide supports, what it means to lift up students. So for them, it has been a process of really integrating those supports into the school district in a way that adds a support system for students and not a detriment. But again, it's a conversation that you'll need to have at the district amongst your family, your community members in your community for what that means, what it looks like, and what you hope to get out of it. It's why, again, it's not a recommendation to do it, but we can put you in contact with them. We have other districts, though, around the council who are adamantly opposed to any sort of process that looks like that involves officers in the building. So again, it's unique to your community. It's unique to the needs of your community and unique to, again, the local context within your district and your state.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, I know I'm out of time, so I will just point out we do have examples within Boston where we have worked with groups on particular issues, whether it be data sharing or others, the code of conduct, for example. We actually have the code of conduct advisory committee. So, we've had plenty of examples on code of conduct and data sharing in particular, the two that I think of that, conversations like that were held outside of school committee, where we bring in experts and community members to think through issues and think through the possibility of making a recommendation to the superintendent and to the committee.
Thank you. I want to ask a question before I go back around. I see a lot of hands are up. One of the things that struck me in the report is that we talk a lot about the systems, et cetera, what we're not doing as a district or what we need to do as a district, but we are 120 communities, individual schools. And I'm wondering, where are the conversations at the school level as we look at these issues? How are school communities going to be encouraged to really sit down and have the hard conversations within their own walls about safety and the relationships between the various people that can provide supports, or what's going on with the families in their own communities, et cetera, as a place to begin, and to take some level of responsibility about how they see their existence. Where does that take place?
So on our side, what we plan on doing is with our safety committee, pick up on a lot of that work that we have with the school leaders in their communities about obtaining feedback about what's necessary. So with these recommendations now, our plan is to make sure we create a process by which we're engaging school leaders and their staff on having the discussions about safety. Luckily, over the last year and a half, we've already been surveying the school communities. We already asked them kind of what they felt that they may be needing. I think this gives us an opportunity to do more of those conversations to just get more feedback based on some recommendations. So we're very excited and looking forward to that. We do also meet regularly with the principal cabinet that superintendent has maintained, and they're a good sounding board on how we can do these conversations school by school. So we'll start to have those conversations and map out a strategy to ensure that we have the school up.
Yeah. Do our schools have their own safety committees?
Yes, most schools, all schools have safety committees, and they do develop a safety plan that we do have to submit to the state annually. And throughout the year, they meet periodically to review the plan, review their drills, and continue to update and have those safety conversations.
Great. Thank you. Right, I'll go back around. I'm going to go by who I see here. I'm sorry, I don't know whose hand was up first, but I'll start with Mr. Tron, go to Mr. Maida, and then Mr. Cardet Hernandez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay. Just one very specific question. The one of your recommendation gives me a kind of ambivalent thinking, ambivalent feeling. But I gather that you had done a very thorough investigation or thorough research before you make that recommendation, and that is the recommendation to acquire an anonymous reporting system, hotline or software. My concern regarding this, while a big part of me applaud this kind of system to encourage reporting and to deal with and to take proactive steps. But on the other side of the concern is the anonymity may run afoul. Well, I hate to be legalistic, but it may run afoul of certain kind of rights for the accused. Let's just assume, the Sixth Amendment right, the right to see to confront the accuser. But aside from these kind of concerns, my question is, what kind of data, what kind of evidence that you have gathered through your investigation before making, before you make that recommendation? And along with making that recommendation, is there some sort of procedure that you have somehow outlined ahead of time that would assist us in our deliberation whether to accept this or not? The kind of procedures that would help us to think there is in fact a need for this, that would outweigh my, say, petty legalistic concerns. So that is the question, and I promise that's all I have. Thank you.
Excellent question. I think it's an important one in consideration. I think the first thing is we shared both with the previous special education report as well as transportation. This is another area where other districts around the country, other large urban districts have already begun to do this. I mentioned Safe Voice, which is currently being done in Clark County Public Schools. There are other places. The challenge that you have is that quite often students and honestly, your students know far more and are aware of far more that's going on in your communities than the adults. But quite often they are afraid to approach someone about what some of those challenges might be, what some of the things that they're hearing might be. And so what you're really affording your students is a safe place to say, I'd like to address some of the things that I'm hearing about the community. It is not, and what you do with that information is critical. It's not an accusation for the accuser as much as it is, here is something that you need to take into consideration and follow up on. It also will allow you an opportunity to get ahead of some of the challenges that might face some of your communities, as opposed to reacting after the fact once something has already occurred. So there are a number of circumstances where it can be beneficial for your communities overall, as well as beneficial for the students that you're working with, particularly if you take the stance of, again, we've heard information, we're going to privately address this with an individual or student to make sure that we put that student in a place where, again, restorative justice, opportunities where other things might come into play for that individual, so that you are proactively addressing challenges that they might face down the road. So again, it's not something that you have to suggest, or have to accept. But if you do, there are places around the country that we can point you to that will help provide a runway for how to get that started, what it looks like, and the benefits it will be to your community.
Thank you.
Mr. Maida?
Okay, I'd just like to know I don't want to sound, forgive me if I sound rude here. I'm just trying to understand exactly what data you guys did use. Like, was this from last school year? And also, like, did you use, I know you said you visited school communities. Did you just talk to the principal? Did you look at data of all the schools? Like, separate of visiting school communities? Just an idea of exactly how this information was gathered.
So one of the things that all of our reports are grounded and rooted in data, the data that's available. So again, we do review data. We're not sharing it publicly with you, but we do review data, review information. We talk to a number of different individuals during the school visits, including our own inspections as we visited schools. So it's not just what we heard from individuals, it's also what we observed on the ground. So the data collection process was multifaceted, and it included not just what we heard from individuals, not just what we gleaned from interviews, but also what we saw and heard on the ground. So I hope that's helpful.
Okay. Mr. Cadet Hernandez?
Sorry, I'm a note taker, so I'm just grabbing my notes really quick. I apologize. I guess I have a question here. sort of more specifically, and maybe this is for the superintendent, like how much of the sort of state of our safety issues are impacted by the changes that we have in the relationship with BPD? And then I think sort of second to that question is, what are we trying to improve? And this may go back to some of the data questions, but what are we trying to improve for kids with via that relationship with BPD?
Through you, Chair. So I think the first one is somewhat hard to answer because to your first point about data, there's no good comparable data. Like, for instance, if we had surveyed students when, say, there were school police and we knew how they felt, and we're surveying them with school safety specialists, then we have something to sort of compare. It's hard to compare incidents because it's sort of pre-pandemic and it's post-pandemic. And we know that a lot has happened post-pandemic that's impacted social and emotional for our students. So it's very hard to sort of get at that because the school safety specialists are relatively new as a model. So, I mean, I don't, in terms of conjecture piece, I don't think we have, don't have enough yet to really sort of look at that because we can't draw a comparison and say, well, there's more incidents because we have this other model, but it is post-pandemic. And we also know that nationally, right, incidents in schools are up because of all of the reasons we've talked about. So we also, we are an ecosystem, right? We exist in the ecosystem of Boston. And, oftentimes things that happen in our community happen over the weekend, happen at night, happen during the summer, those come into the schools. And so when you see upticks in the community, then you can see upticks in schools. So I don't know, right now, I don't have a framework to which to logically answer you on that, other than to just sort of state that is what we have right now. And that's, one of the things that I think we're trying to assess and sort of look at. And then just your second question, can you just reframe your second question slightly?
Yeah, I'm just sort of curious, and I think this is a bigger question as we continue these conversations, but what are we trying to improve for kids via that relationship with BPD? Like, what do we want to be different as a result of that relationship? Because I think once we get clear about that, then people can also have honest conversations if they think that is the appropriate strategy.
Right. So I think, if what we want to make sure that our schools are as safe as possible. And there will be situations in which you have a missing child, you have, an assault happening, run the gamut, and having a BPD response to that, having clarity of what that looks like, what that means, what the response time is, like all of that matters. And so I think what we would want and hope is that as a partner with BPD, we are each clear on what the roles are for BPD and what the roles are for BPS and when those roles are enacted. That with a whole bunch of other mitigation stuff for our schools, which again are not part of that report because it wasn't detailed for that. But, that I think Dr. Hart has kind of mentioned, things like our restorative justice, our peer mediation, all the things we've been recognized for, our anti-bullying work, like our social workers, I could go on and on. But all of those things, right, are there in place to help our students feel safe, to help our staff feel supported. And so I don't think we can kind of separate the one thing out other than to say whatever the relationship is that exists needs to be clear.
And Superintendent, if I could add, we also want our police officers to continue to be in our schools, to continue to build relationships with students, to continue to serve as role models to students, continue to engage in activities with our students, and keep them engaged in building relationships with them. I think it's very important just to kind of demystify some of the tension that's out there. So we also want that as an improvement for students as well and staff.
Thank you.
Mr. Maida?
I accidentally still had it up, sorry.
Sorry. Okay. Are there any additional questions at this moment before we move on? All right, thank you. Again, I want to say to you, Dr. Hart and Mr. Burrows and your team, thank you so much for this report. We know we're just at the tip of the iceberg of both understanding what we've shared this evening, what more that we need to look in, and the immense amount of work that our district has ahead of itself to move forward on these issues. But we want to thank you so much for what you've done for us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hart.
Thank you.
Thank you, Willie.
Thank you. We'll now move on to public comment on reports. Ms. Sullivan?
Thank you, Chair. We have no speakers signed up for public comment on report.
Thank you. Is there any new business? All right, Mr. Cardet Hernandez, and then Dr. Alkins.
I think it would be hard to sort of end the evening after public comment tonight without talking about some of the issues that were raised around folks being paid. And so I'm hoping we can spend a little bit of time there. The first thing that comes to mind for me is obviously the courage that it took for folks to come forward and share that. That's incredibly challenging. And then obviously, I'm so thankful that they did. These are major problems, and it's shocking to hear the current state of our situation, being able to pay folks on time, but also the amount of time that folks are spending trying to get back. The questions that I have that I think would be really important for us to get answers to, how many people have been underpaid? Like, what is it in relationship to the system? What is currently owed to folks? Like, do we have a sum total of back payment that we need to get out to people? What is the current process for getting these people paid? What are we going to do? And if we don't feel like we have the system internally, how lucky we in the United States of America, we can hire a contractor or a subcontractor to come in and help us do this business and get it done. And so, like, what aggressive actions are we taking to do it? I have other questions, but I think those for me tonight feel the most important to have answers to.
Thank you. Superintendent, do you want to respond about where we are in this process of dealing with this issue?
Yeah. So, I mean, I can give you the information that I have. I think that there's a number of our public speakers. I think that there's a number of different individual situations that are happening there. And so I can't comment on particular ones. What I will say is that there was definitely an issue that happened in the budget process last year with moving a few departments over to another place in the organization, that when it came to payroll was very difficult for the payroll department to handle. I think school psychologist was one, I think family liaisons were the other. So we have been, the human capital department, as soon as it became aware of it, has been working actively with payroll and finance to resolve that issue. At anyone that has come forward with an issue, and we check in with the union on this as well. But anyone that we get information on, we attempt to resolve immediately. If we hadn't already done that. There's kind of another bucket on the stipends, and so I made note of that to see what the specific issue is on stipends, and if it is a broader issue, or if it is an individual issue. So we'll need to look at that. I think there were a couple of employees that had left the system, and they were talking about payment owed. That is a labor issue. That's a labor relations issue, and so I can't comment on that. And that's something that has to be dealt with there. So the difficulty with the different types of issues is they all lie in a different place. I will also say that the payroll department, like other schools, departments, positions, we have been actively trying to hire. It is the same issue that we face in other areas of the organization with getting people hired into positions. And so payroll, we've been trying to stand up and support payroll, and we will continue to do that. But they have been understaffed in certain areas. So that, that is something that tomorrow the team first thing will be trying to figure out a step forward. The systems issue that we spoke about is a bigger issue. It's sort of like fixing the engine while the car is running. Particularly while the car is running, while you're trying to process and pay people and do all those things. And so looking at that and having eyes on the broader system and making recommendations around whether it's upgrades to technology and the system software that we're using, whether it's process updates with the city of how we get data, those are all active conversations and we're looking at it. But again, it's not one of those things you can stop it in order to fix it at that moment. We're trying to apply to a system that's already moving to be able to fix it. And some of these issues are legacy issues. But because of the volume that has happened in the last 2 years with the ESSER dollars, the inflation of positions and stipend, it's sort of come to bear. So I will gather with the team tomorrow. It's already scheduled to be able to look specifically, and certainly anybody that brought up a particular issue tonight, most of these we were aware and they're either been resolved or they're being resolved. But that's not to say that there are not others. And so that is something that tomorrow, we will tackle in the morning on this. There will clearly be recommendations as there are in almost every area of our system, either be it through a Council of Great City Schools report or through our own internal examination, that need to be evolved and either rebuilt or improved. And so that is true of our entire system, which is the work that we are undertaking and is ahead of us. So, we are fully committed to doing this as a system. I am fully committed as the superintendent to make sure that these systems get rebuilt and corrected, because our staff deserves that, our students deserve that, and our families deserve it. So I am happy to, at the next school committee meeting, give further update on the progress piece on this. But again, this is something that has been, we have been working to try to resolve as we identify what the issue is and the source of the issue.
I thank you for that. And I'm so happy that you're here to help us resolve these issues and for your leadership. And I guess two more sort of follow-up questions here. One is some of this, the issue of the contract and retro pay, because it sounds like people are not getting retro pay they're promised, and our ability to actually enact the labor agreement and the sort of promises contract. It makes me nervous. I will just say this, as we are trying to fast track other contracts that will include retro pay. It's always about being sober. Like, I don't know, can we continue to approve contracts that require us to approve retro pay if we are not able to make good on promises that we made?
So through you, Chair. So this is a good point, because this is another area of cleanup of trying to get the labor contracts cleaned up. I think the disparate impact here, though, with BTU is the sheer size of the unit. In many of the other units, we're talking hundreds. We might be talking 1,000. BTU, we're talking 8,000 and change. So it's the vast majority of the system. And so it is a sheer volume issue. There's also when anytime contracts are approved and there's a retro and an adjustment to pay going forward, there's a process that happens with the city. So some of that is not within our control initially around the timing of that. And so then depending on when we actually get the approval and move it over to our shop to then process it, there's a part of that that we don't have that specific control over, which is why with retro, we're certainly like pushing it and trying to get the quickest time frame. But some of that does depend on like when we get it. And then again, in this case, it's over 8,000 employees at all different levels of pay and trying to make that process happen. So again, our district should be able to do this. Let's just be clear. Our district should be able to do this. There are clearly things that have to be fixed in this area, both in human process and in systems process. Those are the things we're working on, and those are the things we will work on so that going forward, these are not issues that are a source of stress for our staff.
It's just good for us as a committee also to be aware of this as we're approving contracts, because regardless of the size of the unit, there is now a queue for people who are waiting for payment. And like, if it's a system issue, then it just requires time on task with that queue, and we can't make that queue any longer. And so that's where my head is going. And I'm sure these are solutions you're thinking of, but like, at some point, is there some subcontracting that we need to do, either on two levels with a comptroller to help us understand the state of the problem, so we could publicly say we owe X and we owe X to Y. And at the same time, is there a separate sort of subcontractor we can bring in to help us move payment faster? And I'm sure those are questions you're asking the team to also explore.
That's right. Yeah. Deputy DePina is actually very much in a deep dive on particular within human capital to be able to see where we need to bring external support, where we can stand up inside the organization. And then, we will be certainly bringing Mark Racine in and OIT to be able to look at the systems, the software, to see where that kind of an enterprise solution could make a difference as well.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Dr. Alkins, does that answer your questions, or do you have an additional question?
Yeah, you kind of beat me to it, so yeah.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Tran.
I'm back again. I'm sorry. Just to be very quick. Given the recent spate of, for lack of a better term, safety breach incidences that have arisen within the Boston Public School for the last few months, and also given the framework as evinced by the framework on the public safety report that are evinced by a very able team led by. I'm sorry, I forget the name of the doctor, but anyway, this is my recommendation as well as an appeal. I understand that safety issues, aside from the policy side, rest with the district. Safety committees from all the schools, I gather, are reporting periodically to the district on their work. The hybrid of policy and practice of the safety, in the safety area, also given the recommendation from the district that we've just heard. It is my recommendation and my appeal to chairwoman as well as the superintendent to allow members of the committee, if that is going to be me, then I will gladly be part of it, to be actively and thoroughly engaged and participatory in that process. Because we all know safety is one of the strongest concerns that we have, and safety issues are, are occurring across the board, from civil rights violation to bullying to lack of police or public safety specialist, facility of those kind of issues. It's time that we really put our feet down and work in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trainer. Yes, we will be talking about that at a later time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm. Is there any additional new business? If not, that concludes our business for this evening. And the next school committee meeting will take place on Wednesday, February 1st at 5 p.m., at which time the superintendent will present her preliminary fiscal year 24 budget recommendation. There's nothing further. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Ms. Sullivan, will you please call the roll?
Dr. Alkins,
Yes.
Mr. Cadet Hernandez,
Yes.
Ms. Lopera, Ms. Polanco Garcia, Mr. Tran,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes. Yes.
Robinson.
Yes.
Thank you. It's unanimous.
Thank you all and have a good night.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Good
Thank
night. all.
you.
Thank you.